Hello, bonjour. My name is Ezra Levant. I am the boss of Rebel News, and joining me for a very special live stream tonight of the French language debate for the Liberal leadership contest is one of my favorite people, Alexa Lavoie, who is our star reporter from Montreal. How are you, my friend?
I'm pretty good, and you?
I'm good, and I'm excited about this French debate. I don't speak French very well, as you know. I understand it. I know you're fluent, it's your mother tongue, but I understand it's going to be translated into English. So I think what the plan is tonight is you and I will watch the debate and we'll pretty much be quiet for the debate. If there's something crazy, we can interject and say something in the moment. But really, we will wait until there's any pauses and we can say some things. And afterwards, we'll say things, and if there's a Q&A with the candidates. So we're going to watch along with people. So feel free to interject if there's something that you feel you have to say. But I'm sort of excited to see this Liberal leadership race. I don't think it's very democratic. I think they avoided Parliament by proroguing. I think it's crazy that foreign citizens are allowed to vote in it, people as young as 14. And I think it's super crazy that the likely winner of this process on March 9th will be Mark Carney, who's not even elected dog catcher in Canada. So I think we're watching something that's going to be very interesting, but it's also sort of crazy. What do you think?
I think the same way, but for speaking with my fellow French Canadian, they all say that it might be a really harsh debate to understand because none of them really have good French. So I think it would be really difficult for them to do it all in French. And I think I would have like some difficulty to understand them, but I think it would be really interesting. People need to know that as soon as we know who is the candidate, we will have our next prime minister. And we don't know yet if we will have like some election right away afterwards, or it would take some time. So yeah, I'm actually pretty interested, especially after what we saw. Two candidates have been removed from the race. So
Yeah, I think the most uh, dramatic candidate was Ruby Dalla. And she used to be an MP about 10 or 15 years ago. She's born in Winnipeg. She's born and raised Canadian. She's a Sikh woman. And I interviewed her the other day. I thought she was really peppy and had a lot of pokey questions for Mark Carney. And I think that's why they kicked her out. I think we have a quick clip of my interview with her on the weekend. I don't want to take up too much time, but just for those who were expecting to see Ruby Dalla, they let her stay in long enough so she had to pay $350,000 of an entry fee, but they kicked her out before she could come to the debate. Here, take a look. You know, just a few weeks ago, Justin Trudeau criticized the United States for not voting for a woman as president. He specifically said they missed an opportunity with Kamala Harris.
We were supposed to be on a steady, if difficult sometimes, march towards progress. And yet, just a few weeks ago, the United States voted for a second time to not elect its first woman president.
And I feel like at least Kamala Harris had a shot, like she was in the general election, but they blocked you. They blocked Chandra Arya. They're blocking anyone who, for some reason, they don't approve of. It feels very undemocratic to me. We're going to keep.
Sorry, Ezra, just on that for 1 second. It's quite interesting. We've had this issue with the, Jody Wilson-Raybould. We've had a couple of other women,
Right.
that were completely sideswiped by Trudeau, and then for this leadership race in particular, we had Mr. Arya, whose reasons, are unknown at this point. Does the party have something against strong, successful women who speak about progress in our country? Does the Liberal Party of Canada have something against, immigrants in our country who are trying to ensure that their voices are heard? Does the Liberal Party of Canada have something against women of color in our country who are trying to ensure that the policies that we speak about actually resonate and reflect the need of the hour? We call it the Liberal Party of Canada, but how liberal is this party actually? It just really, really makes, no sense. It's mind-boggling. And I can tell you from the responses that we have been receiving from across the country, liberals and even people that wanted to join the party, to expand our party, which is always the whole point of, any political leadership campaign, is to bring new people on board because they believe in your vision. I can tell you from the messages and the responses that we have been receiving and that are all over the Twitter space and Twitter feeds, people are sick and tired of, the Liberal Party of Canada talking about inclusivity, talking about having, the voices of immigrants heard in our country, talking about the importance of women. And then on the other hand, their actions do not reflect that and completely doing otherwise.
Well, that was Ruby Dalla talking to me on the weekend. I just saw moments ago, Alexa, that she had a legal appeal. She challenged her disqualification, and it was upheld by their sort of secret liberal court. So no surprise there, but Ruby Dalla won't be participating, which is too bad because I always say if someone has some flaw or weakness, let the voters decide. It reminds me, it just, I don't know why a secret cabal of people should choose to cancel Ruby Dalla. Why not let thousands of ordinary liberals cancel her if she's no good?
I'm pretty sure for my personal opinion, I'm pretty sure it's because she would be the only one to challenge Mark Carney with a really difficult question and a difficult topic that Mark Carney doesn't want to address. And so it's just for being more easy for him to win probably tonight the debate. But it seems that it's what is going on when I see like the very, very agreeable way that the media are portraying Carney and not trying to challenge him, and they make everything possible for him to win without being challenged with real issue.
One of the things that was so interesting about my conversation with Ruby Dalla is she brought up the World Economic Forum. And I didn't bring it up. You know, I love that subject, Alexa. I've been to the World Economic Forum several times. I even scrummed Mark Carney on the street there. He was, until very recently, a director. So Ruby Dalla raised that on her own, which sort of surprised me. Maybe she was asking questions that were too prickly. Maybe she was too much elbows up, as they say, too rough. And maybe they were worried that the Conservative Party would use clips of Ruby Dalla in a campaign ad against Mark Carney. I don't know, but they sure took her out. And there's another MP, I think his name is Arya Chandra, if I'm getting that right. He sits as a Liberal MP, so he's good enough to be a Liberal member of Parliament, but apparently not good enough to run for the leadership. I don't get it. It's just a weird system where Canadians are banned, but like I say, foreign nationals who are permanent residents are allowed to vote, which is really weird.
But it's really weird because for Chandra Arya, we are still in the unknown why he's been removed from the race. But what I was able to see for days, it's people trying to now register to be liberals to vote for Chandra Arya to counter Mark Carney. And I saw in many accounts and some big accounts, some mainstream media have tried to reach them out to know why they are advocating and pushing for people to register and to vote for Chandra Arya. And suddenly we saw Chandra announcing that he's been removed from the race. So I don't know if it's because they were too scared that they were a big movement of Canadians just registering for being a liberal just to be able to vote for counter Mark Carney.
It's very interesting. You know, it is a fact of life in Canadian politics that different minority groups are often courted for their votes. And the Sikh community is a very large community, very politically active. And I wonder if someone thought, if you have a Sikh woman, Ruby Dalla is Sikh, if I'm not mistaken, maybe thousands of Sikh Canadians would sign up for her instead of doing what they're told and voting for Mark Carney. Maybe it was the same for Chandra Arya. Again, we don't know because the Liberals were so secretive about it. It's 7:55 Eastern time, and we want to keep an eye peeled because when it starts, we want to go straight to the debate. But I just want to share with our viewers your scrum with Mark Carney when he was in, I think it was Shawinigan or somewhere like that recently. And without further ado, let's play that clip. And this was excellent. And you didn't stop. And they tried to shove you away, but you kept going with your questions. Let's take a look.
Mr. Carney, sorry. Mr. Carney, why are you lying to Canadians saying that you're an outsider when you're the ultimate insider? Why are you lying to Canadians?
Je suis jamais une députée, madame. Alors,
you are the special advisor to Trudeau.
Pourquoi tu parles anglais à Shawinigan?
Because we are an English news outlet, and you know it. But why are you lying to Canadians saying that you're an outsider? When you return as a prime minister, are you going to cut ties with the World Economic Forum?
J'en ai pas.
You have been invited multiple times. Mr. Carney, don't touch me. Mr. Carney, what are your thoughts on the fact that Chandra Arya was removed from the race?
C'est bon, ça.
What do you think about that? Are you going to ask Alberta to stop selling oil to the United States to fight against the trade war? If you become the prime minister, are you going to do that?
On va gagner. Ouais, regarde, on a déjà vu le Cataract va gagner, le Canada va gagner.
Mr. Carney, why are you literally lied to Canadians saying that you're an outsider? Can you stop?
No.
Who are you? Who are you? Who are you?
Je marche pour entrer.
No, you don't have to stop me.
Je marche
You don't have to stop me.
Je marche pour entrer.
There you have it. Very exciting. I love your energy. I love the fact you have no fear. And he lied. He did lie. He lied about being an outsider, and he lied about no ties to the World Economic Forum. Every year he goes to the World Economic Forum. We have seen him there, I think, 3 years in a row. He was on their board. For him to say, I don't have any ties, is a lie.
And also, he keeps saying that he's an outsider when he was the special advisor during the COVID-19. And he was also the economic financial advisor of Trudeau afterwards. So he is more an insider than anybody else, but he keep lying. So imagine if he's able to lie before being elected, how much he can lie afterwards.
I think you're right. Now, I myself had an interaction with Mark Carney a year ago, about 13 months ago in Davos at the World Economic Forum, and I was a little bit lower energy because Abe Yamini, our colleague from Australia, was sort of rough and tumble with him, but I sort of calmed down a bit, and he actually, to my surprise, gave me a couple of answers. Do you guys have that video clip? Skip the first part with Abe and go to when I started talking to Mark Carney. Here we go.
Please, talk to a Canuck. Talk to great, nice to see you. But seriously, he needs help. He's down 20 points. He has a gender gap. Women are choosing conservatives more than liberals. I don't remember the last time that happened. What advice would you have for the youngster?
Going to a central banker for political advice is never a good idea.
Come on, we know that you're in the line.
I heard you had a meeting the other day with the Prime Minister in Ottawa. Is that correct?
I see the Prime Minister from time to time.
In what capacity, may I ask?
I do a lot of work on climate, as you know. Sure, a big fan of that.
Do you ever register as a lobbyist, or is it just friendship?
Sorry, I don't.
When you meet with the PM on climate, are you there on your own behalf, or are you there on behalf of a company lobby?
I am the UN Special Envoy on climate action and finance. So,
and what do you make? It's a bitter cold in Canada, down to minus 40s.
Yeah, back home in Alberta, it was minus 40.
And Guilbeault is saying go to electric cars. That doesn't work.
In for a week. Well, you've got to have. Watch out. You've got to have the full. You've got to have full capacity, right? And you've got to have. You've got to. One of the things we're going to need to do in Canada, across Canada, and this is, for the benefit of jobs in the country, is build out the grid. You can't switch before you build it out, number one. Number two, one of the things you need, regardless of the form of energy you have, we have, is also to have what's called a capacity market alongside the electricity market.
So you think that Guilbeault's plan is a little bit hasty since we haven't done those foundational things?
Well, I think what's important is that, whether it's in Alberta, Ontario, Canada, Australia, for that matter, is that you have to build. You have to build, and it's a time to build. And look, we're in a position where
he's a BSer, isn't he, Alexa? He's just BSing, filling the time, blah blah blah, till he's gone.
But you see how it's way more easier to interview him in Davos than
because he wasn't surrounded.
Canada.
Actually, I shouldn't have cut that off because I did ask him one more question about censorship. Sorry, guys. Can we go back? Sorry, Alexa, I was just so frustrated listening to that again. And he was just blah, 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 just making sure he was just like a fog machine. But guys, sorry to do that to you. He did say something about, remember, this was January 2024. So David Menzies had just been arrested by Chrystia Freeland. So I want to show that part. Sorry to ask you guys to reload that part of the interview. It's in the last third of the interview.
Did you see that?
colleague-
Your rival,
Have
Chrystia
you
Freeland,
seen it?
had one of our reporters
I
arrested.
don't think she did. I think
She didn't say a word against it.
On the incident, as you guys know very well, Canada is a rule of law country. Canada is a democracy. Operational decisions about law enforcement are taken by the police of jurisdiction. Quite appropriately, political elected officials have no role in the taking of those decisions, and that's why I don't have any further comment.
it was the wrong thing. It was absolutely the wrong thing.
Well, thank you for saying that.
Look, freedom of the press. I've
We're
been
friends already.
I've been a public figure in Canada, been a public figure in the UK. I know you got to answer tough questions, and you guys, you ask tough questions, and that's fair.
Well, I want to thank you for saying that, because I have to say, Chrystia Freeland has not yet said anything in the vein that you have. She's been happy to let the cops do her work for her. And if she disagrees with the cops, she hasn't said so.
Well, I've said what I said.
I don't know if he lives up to that creed. That said, he did sort of answer your questions as you walked and talked. He may have lied. He may have spoken French when you were speaking English. He may have not given you his full attention, but he didn't arrest you or have you arrested. And he sort of did answer, even if his answers weren't very good. Would you agree with me on that?
Yes, but he didn't actually ask that security guy that was working for the building to stop grabbing my back, grabbing my arm.
It wasn't perfect. I'm not here for his defense. By the way, I see out of the corner of my eye, Alexa, that the debate is getting underway.
Oh.
So let's listen, and we'll come in. Feel free to blurt out something if something shocking is said or done. But other than that, let's just you and I watch, take notes, and we'll come back on the other side. Before I do, I want to say thanks to Sean O'Vision for a $5. I'm not sure if that's a Rumble rant or a super chat. He says, "Oh, thank God you guys are streaming. I was losing my mind watching the CBC." So with that note, Alexa, thanks for spending your evening with me doing this. Let's watch the debate.
Let's go.
Okay.
Will be to ensure that candidates have a time to speak, equitable time to speak, rather than a timed equal time. Now, I ask you to exercise some discipline in the debate, and let's try and respect the time. And if I have to, I will have to call you to order and break in. But I know that you're all wise people with a lot of experience, and you'll respect all the rules. So let's go, and we'll start with your 90-second opening statements, and I hand over right away to Mr. Baylis.
Good evening. My name is Frank Baylis. I'm a professional engineer. As a businessman, I built up many businesses in the health sector. And with that, I created thousands of employments in high technology sectors. I recognize that collectively, we are facing important challenges. Having said that, I'm very optimistic for the future. Yes, I do have hope for Canada and faith in Canadians. And I have a plan so that we can develop our full potential. This evening, I'm going to concentrate on three priorities. First is to build a strong economy, a resilient economy, which will benefit us all. Secondly, I want to improve our health system so that it will become the best health system in the world. And thirdly, I also want to modernize the federal government so that it can deliver programs and services and do it more efficiently for the benefit of our citizens. Together, we will build a Canada that is proud and prosperous for all Canadians. Thank you.
Madame Gould, c'est à votre tour.
Thank you, Mr. Baylis. Madam Gould.
Thank you. The future is what unites us here tonight. Coming from a middle-class family in Burlington, Ontario, and now, as a mother of two young children, I understand what Canadians are living through. They're concerned. They want to know if they can pay their mortgage, fill their gas tank, or even retire. We are facing serious challenges for our economy and our sovereignty. But this challenge also offers us amazing opportunities. I'm very proud to be Canadian, especially today. Citizens throughout the country are mobilizing. We have the opportunity of regaining the confidence of Canadians, of uniting our country to defend our economy and to protect our values against threats coming from south of the border, and to counter our version of Trump here in Canada. I didn't enter politics to become someone. I decided to go into politics to help my fellow Canadians and to do good things. With a decade of experience, I know how to get there. A prosperous future where Canadians are at the heart of every decision. Our adversaries say that Canada is broken, but we know that this is a wonderful country. Tonight, I'm going to talk about my projects so that our country can be even stronger. I am the candidate for today and the future.
Thank you, Madam Gould. Madam Freeland.
A few weeks ago in Saskatoon, I met a little 4-year-old girl. She asked me whether I could prevent Trump from invading our country. And that's why I am standing to lead the Liberal Party and to become the next Prime Minister of Canada. Trump represents the greatest threat to Canada since World War II. He is threatening us with an economic war, and that's nothing new. The last time that he was president, he threatened us too, and at the end of the day, I succeeded in protecting our economy. But this time, Trump's threats are worse. He wants to turn Canada into the 51st state, and it's no joke. That is why he is supporting Vladimir Putin's criminal attempt to redraw Ukraine's borders. Trump wants to redraw our borders too. We need a leader who understands the seriousness of these challenges and how to face them. A leader that can respond and defend everyone in our wonderful country. I will fight for us. I will fight for Canada. And together, we will win.
Thank you, Ms. Freeland. Mr. Carney now.
Thank you very much, Mr. Trudeau. I'm Mark Carney. I was born in the Northwest Territories, and I grew up in Edmonton. Throughout my life, I've had the opportunity to serve our country as Governor of the Bank of Canada during the financial crisis of 2008. At this time, Canada is facing the worst crisis of our lifetime, and to get through it, we have to make big changes. I can be useful there. I know how to get through crises. I know how to build a strong economy. Yes, there's a lot of uncertainty. And in a crisis, there are things that you can't control. But you have to focus on the things that you can control. We are the masters in our own house, and I know that we can control our own economic destiny. I have a plan to invest more in you, a plan that makes our businesses more competitive, a plan that builds a strong economy that works for everyone. Canadians are ready to stand up for Canada. So am I. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Carney. So let's now attack theme one of the evening, Canada's place in the world. We've been speaking about it since his election. Donald Trump wants to impose tariffs on Canada of 25% on all commercial products exported to the United States, and of course, making Canada the 51st United States state. You will have 1 minute each to answer to the question in the order that was set out earlier. So this is a question of getting warmed up, because as we move along, the debates will get a little bit warmer. So a question from the public to start off, from Diane Bonnet from the Quebec, who's asking how Canada can improve its commercial relations with other countries than the United States. 1 minute, and Ms. Freeland starts.
That is an excellent question. because you understand that Trump represents the greatest threat to Canada since World War II. What we need today is allies, and we have to find them and work with them. And I know how to do that. I am the minister who forged a free trade agreement with the European Union and who signed an agreement with Asia-Pacific countries. We need those allies more than ever. You put an economic question. We need to work together on the economy. We need to work on tariffs in reprisal against those imposed by Trump, and we need to work to cooperate better than ever on national security. We have to work with our allies to protect our economy and our security.
Well, thank you, Ms. Freeland. His second answer, Mr. Baylis.
It's an excellent question, because we know that at the present time, 80% of our trade goes towards exports go to the United States. That's why I propose a new economic bloc that would gather Canada, United Kingdom, Australia, and New Zealand. Why? Because we share the same kind of government. We share the same kinds of values, the same language. Well, of course, the English language as a common language. And it means that we can work together closely. And not only that, but when I was in England and I also sold products worldwide, and I recognize the importance of having agreements of this kind, international trade agreements, especially when we want to harmonize regulation. It really helps to have our products travel throughout the world. So it's a plan that I propose for Canada.
Thank you, Mr. Baylis. Ms. Gould.
Thank you, and I'd like to thank Diane for this excellent question. Most Canadians are thinking about this very thing. One thing that we learned after the first Trump presidency is that we had to adapt and broaden trade relationships with many other countries. Chrystia spoke about free trade agreements with Europe, but also with Asia and Latin America. And what the federal government can do is to help Canadian businesses to access these important markets. We have to understand that Canada has a lot to offer the world, but we have to help businesses to diversify from the U.S. and to enter into these new markets. That is what a government under my leadership will do.
Thank you, Ms. Gould. Mr. Carney.
Well, thank you, Diane, for your question. First of all, I'd like to point out that Canada will never, ever be part of the U.S. in terms of diversification of our allies and our trade allies. We can focus on the free trade agreement with the EU, CETA, but we have to have levers. We have to leverage our assets. We have to become a superpower of clean energy. We have to create supply chains for critical minerals and metals. We have to use our culture that we have here, especially here in Montreal and Quebec. And we have to have a relationship with jurisdictions and countries like the EU, the Francophonie, and the UK that share the same values that we do.
Thank you, Mr. Carney. So let's follow up with the second question. So this question is a follow-up question. You have 1 minute to answer. Mr. Baylis will be answering. And then a 5-minute debate amongst you will follow. So why should Quebecers and Canadians, Mr. Baylis, believe that you are the best placed candidate to defend Canada's interest in this commercial war with the United States?
Well, I've already negotiated hundreds of contracts with Americans, and from time to time, I've seen Mr. Trump's character at work, and I know how to deal with him. And on this issue, I published an article in the newspapers just one day before Inauguration Day. And I said that he wasn't... I said that he was going to target steel first, and that's exactly what he did. So I can't predict what he's going to do, And that's why I feel that I can prepare our defense and our counterattack as well.
Does anyone want to answer?
Parce que je l'ai déjà fait.
Because I've already done it. I've negotiated with Mr. Trump. I negotiated NAFTA, the new NAFTA, and we succeeded in getting a better agreement. This is not the first time that Mr. Trump is threatening us with tariffs against tariffs on steel and aluminium. We responded with counter tariffs, dollar for dollar, and at the end of the day, we won. A response has to be intelligent, and if we remain united, we will win. I know how to do that.
So just how far can we go, Mr. Carney?
Well, we have to recognize that today's Trump is very different from the Trump of the past. He's more isolationist, he's more aggressive. In the past, he wanted our markets. Now he wants our country. So we have to focus on the things that we control. We can't control President Trump, but we can be a master in our own house. We have to strengthen our economy immediately, and that will strengthen our negotiating position.
Thank you, Mark. And what you're saying is absolutely true. And we do need to reinforce our economy, but we need to stand up for the Canadian economy faced with Donald Trump. And what I'm very proud to see is how Canadians throughout the country are standing up against Donald Trump's threats. And we're going to succeed because Canada is strong, but also we are doing things smartly. And Chrystia did excellent work with Kuzma the first time, and we can't respond in the same way this time around. But what the president does respect is force, and I know how to respond to people that I don't agree with. I do it in the House of Commons. I've been doing this for many years.
Not easy.
No, it's not easy. It's not easy.
Madam Freeland?
But I have confidence in Canada and the Canadian team and the unity of our country.
I completely agree with you, Karina. I am so proud of the very personal response of Canadians across the country. But I don't agree that we can't respond to President Trump and win. Canada is strong. That's important. We are the largest market for the U.S. We're more important and larger than China, the UK, and France and Japan combined. So we need to mobilize the U.S. with a strong response.
Two sub-questions. Mr. Gould talking about reopening the trade agreement. Is that a good idea? To reopen the free trade agreement with the U.S.?
Well, the previous agreement is over. He's already ripped it up. That's a fact. I'd like to add something to what Chrystia just said. The U.S. needs us. They need us. They do. But in a negotiation with this president, you have to be clear. What's never on the table? Culture, for example. Our resources like water, for example. Supply management. Those are off the table. That's how you start a negotiation.
And we have to start with sovereignty.
Even more than that, we cannot leave our industries behind. It's not just those issues. There's also aluminum in Quebec, the forestry industry, the agricultural industry. I said that one of the first things that I would do as a prime minister is to protect supply management. I would say this in my speech from the throne. We need to stand up for all Canadians and our economy. This is not up for bargaining.
Last question. François Legault is talking about possible closing off hydroelectricity exports to the States. Now, in your plans of counterattacks against Mr. Trump, the exports of electricity, could they be cut?
I welcome that idea by Premier Legault. It's very important to work with provincial leaders on tariffs, and it's extremely good that he's ready to use anything.
Well, you have to keep all your cards close to your chest. I agree with what Chrystia said about this. It can include semiconductors, oil, and other Canadian resources. Those are assets that Americans need.
We need to make sure that, as my colleagues mentioned, Canada is strong, and so there's a lot of things that we have that the Americans need, and we need to make sure that whether it be individual Americans or the U.S. president, they need to understand that they're depending on Canadian resources.
Our 5 minutes are up. 15 seconds.
Nous avons déjà une entente en place. Alors, de parler d'un compromis ou de parler de négocier une troisième version de l'entente, ça donne rien.
It's important to understand that we already have an agreement in place. So there's no point. Trump is a hard negotiator, but I know how to deal with him. I have the experience that will tell me how to deal with him. So it's not opening a third negotiation. It's a different plan.
Let's move on to our next question. Team Canada approach was adopted to react to Trump's threats. How to ensure that the various governments of Canada, provincial, territorial, and federal work together against the American threats, because the day that 2 or 3 provinces start infighting and are no longer agreed, then Mr. Trump will have a lot of fun seeing the conflict at home. So, Ms. Freeland, you're up first.
That's really an excellent question. And thank you for pointing out the ideas that Premier Legault is raising. I've always said that with the United States, we need to be united, strong, and smart. And that begins with unity. And unity begins with very hard work with premiers, provincial and territorial premiers. And I know how to achieve that because I've already done it during the first NAFTA negotiations, and I did it during the pandemic. We worked very closely with the U.S. I know that today there's a wave of patriotism across the country. I meant during COVID, we worked very closely with premiers. I know that Quebecers and the people of Quebec will strongly support a united approach across Canada. And as Prime Minister, I will be the leader who will unite and defend the country.
Mr. Carney.
Well, the Prime Minister, no matter he or she is, must convene the premiers of all the provinces and territories, and that must be done immediately. To do 2 things. First of all, to create one single Canadian economy, not 13 different ones. If we have one single Canadian economy, the positive impact will be more than more than the negative impact of Mr. Trump's tariffs. That's the first thing. Second thing, we have to have a strategy, as you said. It has to be a Team Canada strategy, and it's the responsibility of the Prime Minister of Canada to lead that strategy.
Madam Gould.
Thank you. President Trump will be there for 4 years. So we have to have a relationship with him because he's going to try to create a chaos, but we do need a calm leader, a leader able to unite people. And that's an excellent idea to make sure that we have meetings with the Council of the Federation, frequent meetings, but to choose industries and to decide what can be negotiated, that's not possible. I agree to make sure that we have one economy and not 13, and that we need to tear down our domestic trade barriers, but we also have to respect the differences between provinces and territories. One of these trade barriers has to do with French language. And so we have to do this in conjunction with the provinces and territories in a way that unites the country so that we can have a strong Team Canada approach.
Well, approximately 50% of our exports towards the States are energy. So you asked a question about electricity coming from Quebec. Mr. Trump says that he's going to slap 25% tariffs on it. No, he's made that threat. What I would say is, why would he stop at 25%? Let's say he goes to 100% tariffs. And then he's going to explain to taxpayers why they have to pay double the price for their electricity. And then he's going to say, no, Mr. Baylis, we're going to send you the bill. And I'm going to tell him, send me the bill. I'm not going to pay it. So it's not going to be me that cuts electricity. It's a question. So if he's the one who's going to end up cutting off electricity himself, because we're not going to pay the tariff on the energy.
I'm going to take some
and that's
time
how we're going to deal with it.
On to the next question, because you talked about the unity of Canadian provinces against Trump. Well, what about the Canadian population? There's surveys that say some 15 to 20% are favorable to being annexed to the United States, and there are some groups who will give voice to their ideas. But how to convince the Canadians who think that they should go that way? How to convince them that they should support Canada, stay united?
That's an excellent question. And it shows one thing that I think we can all agree on, and do all agree on. It's that Pierre Poilievre is completely unable to be the leader that Canada needs now. He's a leader who can't unite Canada. He'd rather sow division, and he's too weak to face up to Trump. That is why the Liberals will win the next election, because we are the party who will defend Canada.
That won't be easy.
If I could enter into the debate, I think that one of the things that we haven't done sufficiently well over the past 10 years is to unite Canadians and to ensure that people are proud to be Canadians. And now people are hearing about the 51st state, and they're saying no. They're standing up and saying, no, we're very proud to be Canadians. We should have more moments of national pride of who we are as Canadians. And one thing that I'd like to end on, if you'll allow me, is that this polarization in our society, this is something we need to work with people who are feeling marginalized, so that we can have a greater amount of people who feel the Canadian pride.
So go ahead, Mr. Carney.
I totally agree with Karina and Chrystia on the attitude of Canadians. They want to stand up against the Americans, but Mr. Poilievre is trying to divide Canadians. Mr. Poilievre, who is a man who venerates Mr. Trump. He can't negotiate with him.
I completely agree.
Mr. Baylis.
Canada is a proud and strong country. So what are we missing right now is a certain level of leadership at the federal level. So what we're seeing right now is that the provinces are going in all directions. They are armed with goodwill. But we need to be unified. And with a strong leadership at the federal level, we'll be able to do that.
We've seen over the past few weeks that everyone in the country has bound together to fight against this threat. Pierre Poilievre says, well, he's going to do what Trump wants. But for Canadians throughout the land, they stood up. And this makes me so proud to be Canadian.
Okay, fine, everybody.
That's right.
We'll come back to this. But it's true that I added a question because we were talking about Canadians in the province. So let's go now with a follow-up question for a 5-minute debate amongst all Canadians. What would be your concrete actions that Canada should implement, and we're changing the sector to encourage a sustainable solution to the Israeli conflict, Israeli-Palestinian conflict? Madam Gould.
Thank you. This is one of the most complicated conflicts in the entire world, and I'm pleased that we finally have a ceasefire. Canada's position should be to work towards peace and security for two peoples, for the Palestinian and the Israeli people, so that they're able to live in peace and security side by side. Where Canada can play an important role is to work on this. There is too much suffering for people in this part of the world. Canada participates in humanitarian missions. We have to make sure that we can provide more humanitarian aid and work with both sides, but also with people throughout the world globally to seek peace. This is our only option.
Who wants to follow up?
I just want to add one thing. When Mr. Trump says things that are false and that violate the international rules-based order, we have to be very clear that we don't agree. Mr. Trump's declarations on Palestinians in Gaza are not acceptable. And more than ever for Canada today, a rules-based international order is extremely important. And we have to be clear that Canada will be a rule of law country.
Mr. Jobin, so we need to reclaim our place on the world stage with confidence, and that means that we have to stop towing the American foreign policy, especially when it comes to the Gaza region. Canada has to be a moral leader. What does that mean? We have to help Palestinians rebuild their civil society. We have to recognize them as a people, and we have to recognize them as a nation. So we should formally recognize Palestine.
We've been trying to do that for years, unsuccessfully.
Yes, we've been talking about it, but we haven't done anything. So I think the time has come to do it formally. And I firmly believe that it's the best way of establishing a durable, sustainable peace.
Mr. Carney, what's your position on this?
Well, first of all hostages must be returned to their families. That's the first thing. Secondly, there needs to be assistance for Gazans. There are two things now which are unacceptable. First of all, Mr. President Trump's idea that Palestine is a big real estate deal, that idea, that commitment by Pierre Poilievre to cancel all international assistance, including to Gaza and Ukraine, that's unacceptable.
I just want to add that I'd like to thank Mark for raising the issue of hostages. I believe that everyone here, all Liberals, will agree that returning the hostages is a priority.
Yes, but our position must be a two-state solution, and we need to work towards peace. And with regards to a future government of a Palestinian state, we must ensure that Hamas does not play a role in that. It's the only way that we will ensure lasting peace. This is what we want.
Just rapidly. So when I say that we should recognize a Palestinian state, it has nothing to do with Hamas. It has to do with the population. We want to help them rebuild. So I'm not proposing for one moment that we'll work with Hamas.
We all agree on Hamas, on a two-state
No, we don't agree with
solution.
Hamas. No, we're against
Yes,
Hamas,
we're all against
absolutely.
Hamas, we are. And we're in favor of a two-state solution. But it must be a Palestinian state, a viable state, a united state that exists next to a peaceful and secure Israel.
Will we ever see that during our lifetime? Well, we can hope so. So do you have a minute each to answer? And I want to ask you how you envisage a dialogue with Mr. Trump. With what tone? Personal? Be it Mar-a-Lago or with what assurance? The president of Poland went to meet him a few days ago, and he had to wait an hour and a half outside of his office to talk for 10 minutes. President Macron was there today. Apparently, he's satisfied of today's meeting. But how Mr. Trump will wake up tomorrow, we have no idea. So I'd like to know, if you're in an office with Mr. Trump, who's very threatening and all of that, so one after the other, tell us, what can you do with this guy? He's very intimidating, no?
I think, first of all, I don't think I'd bother to go seeing him. No, I'm serious. I would send a delegation for discussion purposes, but I wouldn't put myself in a position where he can demonstrate that he wants to be overbearing or intimidating. So he can talk to me, but otherwise I'd send a delegation.
I would begin not by negotiating with President Trump in person, because like all political leaders, President Trump is listening to U.S. voters. It's Americans who are important to him. And that's why we have to begin with a short answer with a list of counter tariffs to put pressure that comes from within the United States.
It's impossible to talk to him. I know you have.
But what I'm saying is that we need to create pressure internally in the States. I would suggest 100% tariffs on Teslas to target Elon Musk, to create pressure within the White House. It worked with steel and aluminium, and that's why we have to begin with a strong response.
Dollar for dollar tariffs. That'll have a maximum impact on the US and a minimum impact here at home. And then we have to reinvest those tariffs in businesses and workers. I think we all agree on that, don't you? Mr. Trump only respects us if we have other options, and this is one of the reasons why we have to build a strong economy here at home. We have to be clear on that. We are a master in our own house. We can resolve the issue here in Canada before we start conversations with him.
1 minute each to answer. 10 seconds.
Yes, but we can't say that we're not going to talk with Mr. Trump. We have to have talks with Mr. Trump. Well, maybe I won't go to Washington, but I will talk to him, and I will explain why Canada is a sovereign country, and that's not up for negotiation, and that we are strong and we're united, but also that there are issues that we need to work on together, and we can find a way to work together against countries.
Well, you had 1 minute each. Some of them went a little bit over,
that are
but
adversaries.
we'll not worry too much about that. No, another question for you. And speaking first to Mr. Carney. Mr. Trudeau was in Ukraine today on his third anniversary of the war. We learned today that Canada will be providing $5 billion, 5,000 armored car vehicles. Just how far can Canada's financial assistance go, and is that something that might displease Donald Trump?
Well, first of all, Mr. Baylis has just mentioned a moral-based Canadian approach, and I'm very proud of the approach by the government of Canada and by Canadians themselves. It's been their approach to Ukraine has been great. We've supported Ukraine because it's a democracy which is suffering an illegal, unjustified, horrible invasion. I said it at the start of the conflict. I'm proud to be a Canadian. I'm not welcome in Russia. Chrystia either.
Yes, we all are. We all are. Maybe not Pierre
We have to
Poilievre.
have principles. We have to follow them. And any discussion on the future of Ukraine cannot happen without Ukrainian participation.
I'm going to open debate on that point. Just how many billions of dollars can we spend to help Ukraine, and how?
Mr. Jobin, I'll begin by saying that we have to be there. We have to stand with Ukrainians because Ukrainians are defending democracy, their sovereignty, but at the same time, as they're doing that, they're defending our democracy and our sovereignty, because this war involves the rules-based international order. Can a country decide to redraw another country's borders? That's the issue. We have to use Putin's money. And that's what I did as Minister of Finance. 5 billion. These 5 billion are originated in Russia. It's Russia's money. And there are 250 billion dollars in Russian money in Belgian banks, that money has to be used to help Ukraine. I've already started that work when I was Minister of Finance, and I'll continue.
All of you.
You mentioned that it was the 3rd anniversary of the start of this war, and this was a very somber day today. But last week, we saw that Mr. Trump abandoned the free world because he had talks with Putin. And so Putin started this war. And I think that Canadians can be very proud of our response in Ukraine. But also, we have to be allied with the Europeans. This is our freedom that is on the line. And so I think that you're going to see that we agree with this approach because there's more to lose with the loss of Ukraine. And for Canadians, we are there to defend democracy throughout the world, but also in our own house.
Yes. With Mr. Trump, we're seeing a fundamental shift in the way things are managed on the world stage. And not only that, but he's essentially allied himself with Russia, which is completely unacceptable. So Canada has a role to play with regards to its other allies, NATO allies.
Completely agree. Completely agree.
30 seconds because,
30 seconds for
everybody.
Everyone? Yes, I agree that we have to work with countries, Nordic countries, and Denmark.
Thank you, Chrystia. I'd like to point out that Pierre Poilievre was against the Ukraine free trade agreement for ideological reasons. That's completely outrageous.
So we're going to change themes now. We're moving on to the second theme of tonight's debate, building a strong economy. 1 minute each to answer the first question in the order set earlier. Canada is exiting a difficult period. We have a very impressive deficit of some $60 billion in the last budget. So when do you foresee a return to a balanced budget? Ms. Freeland speaks first.
Mr. Jobin, we are all liberals, and we will not repeat conservative misinformation. We are not going to do the Conservatives' work for them. The reality is that Canada's financial record is very strong. We have a AAA credit rating. We have the lowest debt-to-GDP ratio in the entire G7. But speaking of our economy, we have to begin with the fact that we're living in a completely different world. Let's begin with the threat that Donald Trump poses. And as Karina suggested, we have to seize the opportunity of this wave of Canadian enthusiasm to build, to attract investment and jobs.
Your time is up. So I'm also asking Mr. Carney, $60 billion. How many years does it take to come back to a balanced budget? 3 years, 5 years, 10 years?
Well, I have a plan to balance the budget, the operational budget, in 3 years. But in terms of the budgetary situation here, the fiscal situation, we've seen an increase in spending across the Federation, which has reached an average of 9%. It outstrips our economic growth by 100%. So in order to invest in public services, we have to change the way we manage our spending so that we can get proper results.
To talk about the deficit, you're talking about a tax cut and increase the military budget and increase to 2% for NATO. Where are we going to find the money to ensure that the deficit decreases while yet increasing military expenditures and cutting taxes? Where's the money going to come from?
Well, first of all, this is one of the reasons why military spending is important. It has to be increased between now and the end of the decade. That's important. What's important about military spending is to strengthen the security of Canadians. That's really what's important. That's why we have military spending. It's not just an arbitrary number. It's more important to focus results.
You're saying 3 years we'll get to a balanced budget?
3 years.
Mr. Baylis.
Well, I'm certainly going to bring a more disciplined approach to managing the budget in Ottawa. And does that mean that I'm going to be cutting services or increasing taxes? No, there's a third way, and that is to augment our productivity. So as a business leader, I know how to increase productivity. I built a company with 2 people, myself and my mother, and we had 1,000 employees in the end. So I understand what needs to be done. I understand the private sector and I understand the public sector. I'm the only one here who understands both. Why? Because I have been an elected official, but I'm also a businessman. So I know how to implement government policy that is going to help us build up and grow our economy at an advanced rate.
Thank you. I think that we need to be realistic and direct with Canadians. And as a Liberal, I'm not comfortable to start with budget cuts. We need to talk about this 40 billion that was announced in the fall. It is our duty and our responsibility. We do have agreements with Indigenous people in this country, and we have commitments in the years to come. And I agree, we need to grow the economy. We want to increase productivity. But to think that we can do that in 3 years, well, I don't really think that that's realistic. And at this time, we're facing extreme threats from the U.S., so we have to be able to invest in our people, in our businesses, to protect them against the U.S.
I want to spend some time on this theme. It's very important. Mr. Carney, you spoke about the possibility of reducing transfers to provinces and to persons. Did you not?
No reduction in provincial transfers. No reduction in any initiatives. No, none. No increases, just status quo. Status quo, yeah. We have about 150 million in programs within the government budget. We have to increase productivity. We're in Montreal tonight, which is a center, a hub of AI that has to be put to work for the government. At the same time,
I'd like to add something. I'd like to add something.
Je veux juste dire, la responsabilité fiscale est importante, mais c'est important d'être clair
Yes,
avec les
it's important to get to a balanced budget, but we have to be clear and tell Canadians, explain that we are in a strong position today. What we need today is invest in productivity without cutting services that are helping Canadians directly.
I have other questions about transfers
I was
later.
the Minister for Service Canada. And when you have experience in governing, you know that we're already using AI to provide services, to make our services more efficient. We can always do more, but at a point in time where we need to support Canadians against economic threats, I don't agree in saying that we're not going to spend anything more. If we made this decision during the pandemic, if we had not made this decision, Canadians would have suffered more and businesses would have shuttered.
Yes or no to the next question. Was it a good idea to cut the GST quickly? Yes or no, Mr. Carney?
Yes. For the purchase of our first home.
That's exactly my plan. Yes, we agree on that.
Yes, but from 5 to 4% because it helps all Canadians.
No, and I'll be honest with Canadians on that topic. We have to bring some discipline to Ottawa. It's easy to say, yes, we'll give you this and we'll give you that, but let's be clear. We do have a deficit and we have to address it. And we can't promise that we're going to cut the
Can I add one thing?
I want to conclude on this.
It's an important point, I think, because we're talking about investing in our countries. We're all talking about the same thing. For me, we have to use the power of the federal government to drive investment to transform our economy. We're in a crisis. We have to take action.
We have to be liberals. We need a liberal approach. Jean Chrétien and Paul Martin's party, we were always a party of budgetary responsibility and economic growth. We also need the support of Canadians. We can achieve both. We need to support Canadians and be disciplined.
On to another scene, question 3. Well-educated labor, interested in the economic success, creation of jobs. How are you going to ensure that Canada has access to highly qualified labor? I know that it comes under provincial jurisdictions, and I come back to transfers. Will you maintain the transfers? I asked a question earlier whether you're going to increase them because of the economic situation right now, in particular what's going on with our American friends. And the people that I talked about in the public service in Quebec are worried right now and are hearing rumors that there will be a cut in transfers. Earlier you said no, status quo, no risk that there would be any cut in transfers to provinces and persons. Mr. Baylis gets to speak first.
Concerning transfers, provincial transfers, no, that's not where we're going to cut. I want to increase, I want to grow the economy by investing so that we can increase our productivity as well. So we have to believe in ourselves. We have to invest in ourselves. And the thing that worries me is the fact that we've cornered our universities, we've squeezed them. It's not a good thing because it's fundamental to building up an advanced economy. So I'm against the cuts to university funding.
No cuts to transfers to the provinces. It's now time to increase talent and to train our workers. It's the right time to do that.
Oh mon Dieu. Madame Freeland.
Nous sommes des amis.
Well, we're friends. We're friends, but...
Ils sont des amis aussi. Mais nous sommes
they're friends too. We are friends.
Non, ce n'est pas le moment de couper les
No, this is not the time to reduce transfers to the provinces. It's the right time to work more closely than ever with the provinces. And it's important to ask the provinces to work closely together. What I'm seeing among the provinces is a tremendous willingness today to unite as part of Team Canada, for us all to work together. We're ready to do that. And we can genuinely increase economic growth and prosperity for every single Canadian by creating free trade within our country. It is the right time to do it, and we can.
No, I would not cut any transfers to provinces or territories. I don't think it's the time to do that. And it's important to know that I would respect the jurisdiction of the provinces. But what we could do as a government would be to modernize our social safety net and make sure that EI, for example, has an increased amount of resources to provide training to our workers. So it would be to cooperate with provinces and territories to use the existing programs on the federal level and to make sure that people would have access to these services and these programs. We need to modernize our social safety net for the 21st century. There are too many for whom it doesn't work.
I'll follow up with the debate, and Madam Gould gets to answer the question first. These last some months, several specialists say that the elimination of barriers to trade between provinces and territory would contribute to favor economic growth in Canada. This is not a new idea. At times it seems to be difficult to apply. What would you do to make it work?
As you said, this is not a new idea. Every prime minister since Laurier has tried to do it. But I think that what's important to have would be to have dedicated working groups according to sectors to see what are the regulations that can be set aside while respecting the differences, to work together. This is something that I've done with the National Daycare Plan in order to share best practices between provinces and also to see what are the strengths and the weaknesses and how we can do things. This is federal work, to work together to find solutions. And this is how, what I would do, I would have frequent meetings with the Council of the Federation to make sure that this Team Canada approach would be strong.
Mr. Carney.
Well, yes, let's be clear. We need to increase our GDP by 5%. That's much more than the impact of Trump's tariffs. We have to reduce prices by 15% as well. We're facing an affordability crisis in Canada. How do we do that? First of all, we have to convene premiers, and the federal government has to lead the initiative. We have to scrap federal barriers. There are many of them, and I know that the government's already working on this. Thirdly, we need to have a meeting with no preconceptions. We have to scrap barriers which need to be torn down.
I think this is an extremely important issue. And Karina's right when she said that this is something we've been trying to do for a long time. But I think the time for it has really come because Canadians are smart. And everyone understands that we're facing an existential threat coming from Trump. So if Trump doesn't want free trade with us, it is clear that we need to have free trade within Canada. Canadians are ready. I'm very happy with the initiative by the Premier of Nova Scotia, who suggested a reciprocal approach among provinces. That is a very good first step. And we have to move fast because Mr. Trump is moving fast, so we have to move fast too, and we can. Canadians are ready.
Mr. Baylis.
It's a challenge. It's going to be difficult. And it's not enough to say, it's not reasonable to say we're just going to deal with it. So I have two projects that will help with this. First of all, is to establish two natural gas pipelines from Alberta to east to diversify our markets. And secondly, I also the other project is to build a Trans-Canada high-energy power line. And that's how we're going to be able to
now moving on to another thing,
abolish the
supporting the Canadian population.
barriers.
As you know, the pandemic hurt quite a bit. We had high inflation. We have an important lack of affordable housing, and the cost of the groceries keeps increasing. The whole cost of living is increasing. So as a Prime Minister, what would you do to help Canadians? Mrs. Freeland speaks first.
Vous avez raison.
You're right. Life is too difficult for people, and Canadians are very concerned about the threat that Trump represents. I have a very concrete and specific plan to help people with affordability. I would begin by reducing taxes for the middle class. After that, I would limit credit card interest rates, and then I would add 100,000 daycare spots. Then I would ensure there was more affordable housing created. The most important thing we need to remember, however, is that Pierre Poilievre will cut and cut and cut. And that's why the conversation that we're having now is extremely important, because the Liberal Party is the only party that can grow the economy and
Mr.
support
Baylis,
Canadians at the same time.
Inflation caught us all off guard and hit our vulnerable segments of the population. So I have solutions for this. First of all, I want to bring budget discipline to Ottawa, and the second thing is to increase our productivity. Through budget discipline, we will in fact allow the value of the Canadian dollar to increase and the value of goods to go down. And by increasing our productivity, we will have more money in our pockets. So that'll be a double effect. And things are going to cost less because our dollar will have a higher value, and we will have more spending power. So this is how we're going to deal with this cost of living issue. It's not through an isolated program here and there. We need a whole system approach.
Ms. Gould?
Thank you. What does it mean if we say we're going to have the strongest economy in the G7, if it does not work for Canadians, and if it's hard for them to pay their rent or to pay their groceries? We need to have an economy that supports Canadians and works for them. What does it mean? I'm going to cut the HST. This will be about $700 in savings. I have a housing plan to create more housing to help first-time home buyers to enter into the market and to make sure that we put an end to homelessness, because poverty is expensive in our country. And I want to modernize our social safety net to make sure that seniors, that people with a disability, people who have lost their job, have access to basic services, and that there is a guaranteed income.
Well, look, I'd like to add that I intend to cut taxes for middle-class families. As I've just said, as Ms. Freeland has just said, I'll cut GST on new homes. I would focus on investing in programs such as daycare that Pierre Poilievre intends to cut. He will cut them. He's the wrong person at the wrong time for the Canadian economy. As I've just mentioned, a strong Canadian economy will bring down prices. It's important to seize this opportunity to do that. And also, we have to strengthen competitiveness in key sectors like broadband.
Little question here. How much does a grocery basket cost for the average family? For four people?
I'm not the one who deals with the food shopping at the house.
200 to 250 in Toronto. It's about 250. Yes, I've done grocery shopping.
According to two organizations, it's approximately...
I save more than my husband when I do the shopping.
It's $300 per week. That's the Canadian average.
If you'll allow me.
No debate on this. We have to be out here at 10, not at 11. So follow-up question with a 5-minute debate, and I'm starting with you, Mr. Baylis. Immigration is a crucial element of Canada's success over the last few years. The increase in the number of immigrants in Canada added pressure on the health system in Quebec, education, daycare services, and housing, of course. And it cost quite a bit in Quebec. We know about Mr. Legault's disputes with the federal government on that. We have some 450,000 immigrants in Canada, 200,000 in Quebec. How to find the proper balance in the immigration system in Canada?
First of all, I would like to say that immigration is a good thing. It's important for Canada. My parents were immigrants. My mother comes from Barbados and my father from Britain. And we have also immigrants from India in our family. Having said that, we do have to control the number of immigrants, and especially for permanent residents and also for students. So we have to have to have a smart immigration system that we had before. So we should step back and reinstall that.
Mr. Carney, you said today that you're going to maintain the immigration thresholds while Quebec comes demanding to have them cut. So what do you plan on doing with immigration thresholds if you become Prime Minister?
First of all my grandparents were immigrants to Canada. But now, there's a housing crisis. We can absorb them, but there's been a huge hike in the number of immigrants across the country over the past few years. So we have to have a cap for some time so that we can rebalance the system.
This cap that you wanted, we'll have a little bit of difficulty imagining what the cap should be.
Well, there will be difficulties. There were errors in the past. That's clear. I'm here proposing change. We need to resolve the issues, but it takes time.
It takes time. It takes daycare service, takes schools, housing.
Yeah, we have to invest in daycare as well.
I want to start by thanking Frank for what he just said. It's very important, and it was very well said, the contribution that immigrants make. Thank you. It's very important that we maintain Canada as a country that welcomes immigrants. But if we are to achieve that, we need to have enough social services and housing for the people we welcome and invite. So as Prime Minister, I would make sure there was a link between housing and immigration. And when that link is there, we can reach a balance that will be good for society and good for the economy. I'll conclude by saying that we need to use the talents of immigrants who are here. One aspect of that notion, seizing opportunity that the Trump crisis presents, is to recognize the qualifications that have been earned abroad. There are too many doctors driving cabs. We have to change that.
I'm the only one who hasn't spoken yet. I thought everyone had a turn. So on the question of immigration, we have to be honest with Canadians. The government was too ambitious with the immigration targets over the past few years. I think that everyone and the Liberal Party sees the importance and the value of immigration. My grandparents arrived here with $5 in their pocket, and now I'm a minister in the government. But we do have to have conversations with provinces and territories to understand what is the capacity. Well, if a province says we have too many, well, we need to have this dialogue to set targets. And if you'll allow me to end, what we haven't spoken about is temporary immigrants, international students, and temporary workers. This figure was very high, over 2 million people entering every year. And these conversations need to be had in order to know how many can we absorb so that everyone who arrives in Canada has the opportunity to succeed and to have a good life here.
Over to you.
We know that we're looking for a number. So, est-ce que Canada can take 100 immigrants per year? Of course. Can we have 100 million immigrants per year? Of course not. So, we have to find the figure that we can, and it's linked to our capacity for health services and housing. So we have to sit down with provinces to find what is this figure, so that we can come.
What we have to do is to try. We need to recognize that the law needs to be changed because we are a welcoming country for students.
20 seconds each, the two of you.
I would say very quickly that we can't allow the kinds of comments that about immigrants that we're hearing coming out of the US at the moment. We can't have that in Canada. It is very important that we say it because some people want us to say the same kinds of things. That's unacceptable.
20 seconds.
How much? 20 seconds, okay. Chrystia has drawn a link between immigration and the housing crisis. She's quite right. We have to build millions and millions of new homes here in Canada, and we have to strengthen our programs, like the Housing Accelerator Fund that works here in
Question
Quebec.
3 on this theme, the Canadian health system is facing huge challenges like the aging population, the lack of professionals, waiting lists that are quite long, in particular for surgery in Quebec. In Quebec, of course, is responsible for health, like other provinces, but it has all the same problems as well. Earlier, you said that there won't be any increase in transfers, but our health system in we're just talking about the health system in Quebec. Yet, if our health system needs more money in order to work properly, how will you not think of increased transfers? Because we need them now, Mr. Carney. Ms. Freeland starts off.
OK. Alors, je suis tellement d'accord.
I completely agree that our healthcare system is extremely important to us. It's part of our Canadian identity, even. We need a good healthcare system. I must also say that I respect the jurisdiction of provinces and territories when it comes to health. I've had a number of conversations with provincial and territorial premiers who say that they manage the system. The federal government has already put in a great deal more funding. We need to talk about results with Canadians, and there's some specific things we need to do as well. I propose that we invite Canadian physicians working in the U.S. to come back.
And we can also tax them, right?
And, well, they'll pay the same taxes as everyone else.
No,
Canadians want to come back to Canada because they understand that we're under threat, and they don't much like what President Trump is doing in the U.S.
So, I spent quite a bit of time working in the health sector myself, and I do have a plan for us. We are going to have the best health system in the world, yes, and it's doable. So, but we need to change our paradigm. Our system was geared towards emergency and acute care. But we need is a system that deals with chronic care. So what is that? Right now, there are two entryways for the health system. You either have a doctor or you have to go to emergency. And of course, I don't have to describe how things proceed in the emergency. So, and I think that it's important for us to train nurse practitioners that can work at home, visit people at home. And I think that we also have to broaden the scope, professional scope of pharmacists, so that they can have the. Yes, they're trained to do it, but they have a wide scope of.
They are trained to receive more powers, but we don't even more. Mr. Carney.
Well, first of all, we have to maintain provinces for the provinces, and we have to respect their jurisdiction, including Quebec's jurisdiction, of course. Secondly, we have to eliminate obstacles to nurses and physicians here in Canada. We should only have one Canadian economy, not 13 different ones. Thirdly, we have to build a healthcare system which is modern. We have to use, as Mr. Baylis mentioned, one single digital medical file across the country. It has to be a national file, and we have to increase the use of AI within the healthcare system. And as the federal government, we can work in cooperation with the provinces.
500 billion in the United States on artificial intelligence, and a lot in France as well. Not part of the debate,
yes,
but there it
we
is.
have to invest. We have to increase our spending on AI.
Mr. Jobin, AI can't do everything.
We have to add physicians as well.
I agree. And Canada is very strong in AI. We have to leverage that. We have the capacity.
Well, it takes a lot of time. Chronometer. Madam Gould.
Thank you. I'd like to recognize that there are francophones outside of Quebec as well, and they need healthcare services in their provinces and territories.
Monsieur le modérateur, que ce sont les compétences du
As you
province.
said,
Alors, qu'est-ce que peut faire
this
le
is a
gouvernement
provincial
fédéral?
responsibility. So what can the federal government do? We can increase transfers, but it's the same taxpayer that wants to see results. And we want to make sure that the provinces are using the funds responsibly rather, to have results for Canadians. I think that
a dépensé sans avoir des résultats.
a lot of
Et
money
c'est
was
pas
spent
pour le
without seeing
gouvernement
results,
canadien
and it's not up to the government of Canada to have the results. It's for Canadians, because this is the money of Canadians. So for provinces and territories, they have to be honest with their citizens, with what they're doing. And I think that I want to have agreements with provinces and territories on mental health services. This is also important everywhere.
Thank you, Ms. Gould. Let's go to question 4. Auto robbery, which represents a big problem here in Montreal, and fentanyl is killing people in our communities. And some people are scared for their lives and their security in major cities. We see it here in Montreal and Toronto. A lot of violence in the streets almost every day. As a Prime Minister, how would you find the balance between an obligation of fighting against criminality, that's the police, and the necessity to attack the underlying causes of criminality through help organizations, community organizations? Ms. Gould, you get the answer.
First of all, people need to feel safe in their houses, in their communities. This is crucial for us as Canadians, and in my community of Burlington, we've seen an increase in crime, as you mentioned, here in Montreal and in other parts of the country.
Alors, comme gouvernement fédéral,
as federal government, we need to make sure that we have laws that ensure that people who steal vehicles, but not just that, that they're in this supply chain, that they are responsible. We have businesses here in the Port of Montreal that are benefiting from vehicle theft and property theft. So we have to change the criminal code to make sure that our laws can be enforced, but also it's up to provinces, territories, and municipalities to make sure that their police forces have the necessary tools to protect the citizens.
Ms. Freeland.
I would begin by saying that I completely agree with Karina. Security and safety are paramount. You're quite right to put the question, because people today don't feel safe in their cars and often in their homes. And the Liberal Party needs to be very clear with Canadians. We will deliver. Now, how do we do that? We begin by working closely with all levels of government and police forces. We've done it in Brampton, and we've had results within a few months. We also have to more effectively control the border, including with the use of AI, because one of the reasons that there is so much car theft is that it's possible to export stolen vehicles. We need to spend money on that. The federal government is responsible for the border, and we have to control it more effectively.
Mr. Baylis.
We have problems, and it starts with homelessness and the lack of affordable housing, and that's what pushes people into criminal lifestyles.
Go ahead.
Non, mais si vous permettez de finir, là.
No, please allow me to finish.
What he's saying.
I'm not trying to blame people who have problems. We have to help them. But having said that, there are things that we can do. For example, Mr. Trump was talking about reinforcing the border. I wouldn't have given in to him on that. I would have said we also have a problem with the border because there are a lot of illegal weapons that get through the border. So we should have a negotiation on that, and not just I'll give you whatever you want. And secondly, the government creates laws, and now there are all kinds of technologies that we can incorporate into our legislation so that our police can use this technology, so that they can update their fight against crime.
Wow. There needs to be a big change here. Mr. Bailey and my colleagues are right. We have to secure the border. That's the federal government's responsibility to do that. We have to invest in the police and surveillance. We have to work with the Americans on this because most firearms come here from the U.S. Let me finish. We also have to strengthen the criminal code for violent crime, like domestic violence as well. We have to have a buyback program for firearms. Mr. Poilievre's against that. He's quite happy to see AR-15s on our streets here in Canada.
I agree with what Mr. Carney was saying, but when Mr. Baylis was speaking, what I wanted to say is that we can't blame people who are homeless for crime. That's not right. You said that crime was caused by homelessness. And I think that it's really important to be honest that these are criminal organizations. It's organized crime that is stealing vehicles or that is breaking and entering into homes. The only solution for that is to reinforce our borders, our criminal code, to make sure that we try to end firearms entering into our country, but it's not right to equate homelessness with crime.
We're changing up a little bit. It's a follow-up question, followed by a 5-minute debate. In fact, I have two questions for you. Bill 96, adopted by the National Assembly of Quebec, modifies the Official Language Act, including an article affirming the existence of a Quebec Constitution. Are you ready to recognize such a Constitution and Quebec-specific character? Who wishes to attack that? Let me see who's supposed to. Well, it's Ms. Freeland who's up on this one first. On the Quebec Constitution, would you apply?
I'd like to begin by talking about French. I believe that it's extremely important to be clear that French is in decline in Quebec and across Canada. It's also very important to point out that, in my view, all Canadians understand that Mr. Trump is a threat to our country and our economy. He's also a threat to our identity, and our identity includes our bilingualism. It includes French. And for that reason, I think that now it is more important than ever that we respect and support French and support Francophones across Canada, as well as Anglophones in Quebec. I'll conclude in saying that when I was elected in 2013, my French was very weak.
I'm talking about a Quebec Constitution.
I am ready to support French and bilingualism across Canada. That's very important.
Anybody else want to answer?
The Liberal Party is a party that upholds the Charter of Rights and Liberties of Canada. And as a Liberal and as a Prime Minister, my work will be to make sure that all Canadians throughout the country, in each province and territory, have access to their rights and freedoms. So whether Anglophones in Quebec or Francophones outside of Quebec, I recognize the importance of the French language here in Canada, but in my opinion, the Charter of Canada is a Charter of Canada.
Mr. Bailey.
First of all, I can't say if I agree or not because I haven't seen this charter. So I should read the document first to see what it contains to see if I agree or not. Concerning Bill 96, it's discriminatory against young francophones who want to learn English as a second language, who tell their parents, if I told parents, listen, you can't learn math, they would say, are you crazy? But if I tell them, you can't learn English, which is a business language, that doesn't make sense. So I'm against Bill 96 because I think it's discriminatory against young francophones.
Mr. Carney, for or against?
Oh, Mr. Jobin, I'm not a lawyer. I'm not a constitutional expert either. I am a progressive. There are major challenges facing the French language here in Quebec. We have to strengthen the French language, have to promote it. And now, Francophone institutions like French CBC are in danger. They're in danger because of Pierre Poilievre. He intends to abolish it. It's incredible. It's at the heart of our society, our Canadian society. And the Liberal Party of Canada will strengthen French CBC and English CBC as well.
Well, that's something I wanted to underscore, and thank you, Mr. Carney, for having brought it up. We can't allow Mr. Poilievre to become Prime Minister because he clearly said that he will attack CBC and Radio-Canada, and Radio-Canada and CBC share the same infrastructure, so it's a direct attack on our cultural institutions, and Pierre Poilievre is a real menace in that respect.
Yes, and I believe that this is a time when, as Liberals, we need to be united. The Liberal Party will always support Canadian culture, Francophone culture in Canada. We will all support Radio-Canada and CBC. This is a very important time for Canadians. Pierre Poilievre has been very clear. He wants to cut and cut and cut, and that is very dangerous to our identity and sovereignty.
A specific question about Quebec. What are you going to do with the law on laïcité, which is against the rights that are guaranteed by the Charter? So Ms. Gould starts off.
Encore une fois, le Parti libéral.
Once again, the Liberal Party is the party that upholds the Charter of Rights and Freedom. So our work as a federal government and my work as a Prime Minister would be to defend the rights and freedoms of each Canadian. And Quebecers themselves have brought this to the Supreme Court, and they are fighting against this law. As a government, I will support them to make sure that each Canadian in this country will have access to the rights and freedoms.
I would like to add, very well said, Karina. I completely agree. Our party is the party of the Charter, and as Prime Minister, I will always uphold the Charter.
I just got to chime in there. This is the woman who seized our bank accounts. She seized hundreds of bank accounts during the trucker convoy, and she's saying she's the party of the Charter of Rights and Freedoms. Chrystia Freeland smiled and laughed as she had hundreds of Canadian families immediately penniless. They couldn't buy groceries. They couldn't pay their rent. She's a wicked liar. I'm sorry. I just had to chime in, Alexa.
It's okay. There is so many things that I need to discuss afterwards. There's so many things that have been said so far that is lie.
All right, we'll do that at the end. I just couldn't contain myself. We'll go back to watching the debate now. Merci, mon ami.
Attack by the Americans. And therefore, we need reasonable accommodation. I respect secularism here in Quebec. I respect that. But that's possible in Canada. It's not possible in the US.
20 seconds.
It's an important thing. I've been fighting against this bill ever since it's been implemented. So there was a young Muslim woman And her parents said that she was doing a good job. She didn't have any problems. Her only crime is that she was wearing a hijab. And we removed her from our employment. So let's be 100% clear. This is a discriminatory law. And the cost that we had to pay for the trial, it's our group that gathers the funds to fund her trial case. So I'm set against this law.
Team number 4, climate change. It's real, and it's a real threat. We've seen the fires and other extreme meteorological events. The leader of the Conservative Party, Pierre Poilievre, wants to cease attacking climate change. The carbon tax, he wants to axe it. What do you do with the carbon tax, Ms. Freeland?
I will eliminate the carbon tax on consumers, and I will do that as part of a larger climate plan that will continue to fight climate change. There's something important that has to be said tonight. We need to recognize and thank Prime Minister Trudeau for what he's done on climate. He is the first leader in Canada's history to put in place a climate action plan. And today, for the very first time, we are seeing economic growth while emissions go down. We have to continue on that track, respect the position of people who say they don't want to be taxed directly, and continue with the climate incentives that I set up as finance minister for the green industrial transition that creates jobs and attracts
Baylis,
investment.
on the carbon tax.
I would implement a climate policy that would have a tangible and direct impact on the environment based on the recognized model of the polluter pays. The system that we have right now doesn't work. We'll implement a system that does work, where everybody contributes, individuals and industry alike. Of course, there's a cost to collecting waste. There's a cost to water treatment and for pure air. And people who say that we can do that without a cost are not honest about it. So right now, the carbon tax doesn't really deal with the issue. I would like to reinvest the funds in programs and Canadian businesses that will implement real changes to the climate situation.
Ms. Gould.
Moi, je ne vais pas abandonner la lutte contre les changements climatiques. Je crois que
I'm not going to abandon the fight against climate change.
Consoler à la taxe sur la carbone.
I'm not going to concede on the carbon tax. I promised that I would cancel the increase that was set for April the 1st, but we need to be honest with Canadians. It's a price on pollution, and this represents 10 to 15% of the reduction in our emissions, and that's a lot of what we're doing. And as a mother with 2 children, I cannot allow the planet to burn. I have to do my share to make sure that we can have clean water and clean air. And when Canadians say that they don't agree with the price on pollution, it's really a question of affordability right now. So we need to deal with affordability, and then we need
Mr.
to
Carney,
do
what are you
something
going to do
with
with the
climate
carbon?
Well,
change.
first of all, I've devoted most of my career to fighting climate change. Recently, as the UN Special Envoy, we're in Montreal. Montreal was where the protocol was signed, where the COP15 was held as well. We know that it's a duty for Quebec and Canada to deal with climate change. That's the Canada I know. Secondly, we're in Montreal, which is the headquarters of Hydro-Quebec. It's an economic imperative for Canada and Quebec. It's an economic imperative to reduce greenhouse gases so that we can have clean manufacturing, so that we can have clean infrastructure so that we can have good jobs and export abroad as well. And we have to have a better trade relationship with the EU.
But Mark, what would you do about the carbon tax?
I'll be cancelling it on consumers and small and medium businesses and farms, and I'll replace it with a system where big polluters pay and households won't pay.
We agree. And I'd like to say something very quickly. It's very important for us as a political party to listen to Canadians. And Canadians have been very clear. We have to win against Pierre Poilievre. And with Pierre Poilievre, we lose everything.
So we now have a 5-minute debate, and Mr. Carney will answer the question that I'll put to you. I said that there was people from the party that sent in some of the questions, and Stéphane from Quebec answers to the survey. It says, with the acceleration of climate change that opens up new commercial routes in the Arctic, it might be the next world of geopolitical. How would your leadership reinforce the sea sovereignty and security of Canada in the face of the new issues with military bases, submarines, etc.? How we're preparing for the threat to the Arctic?
Was that a young Liberal who asked that question? Stéphane, it's a very good question. It's one of the greatest risks for our country. We have to strengthen the security in the Arctic. Everyone knows this. I was born in the Arctic, in the Northwest Territories. I know it well. So we need to have at least 2 military bases in the Arctic region. But how do we do that? That's the difference between us, between the Liberal Party and Pierre Poilievre. Pierre Poilievre takes a flight to Nunavut like an emperor, and he says, we're going to build a base here. And he comes back to Ottawa, to his mansion in Ottawa. I've had conversations with the Premier of Nunavut. We're talking about building a base, the possibility of securing the Arctic, while at the same time increasing the prosperity of people in Nunavut, including Inuit, of course. We have to cooperate and work with them.
We have to do it pretty quickly because the ice is melting.
But it's Canada, isn't it? We don't have emperors here.
One thing that I totally agree with, that we do need military bases in the north, and we need to do this in cooperation with Indigenous peoples and the Northwest Territories. But a difference that we have is that you don't want to reach the 2% NATO spending until 2030. No, not you. And if we're going to protect the Arctic, our borders, our sovereignty, we need to invest more quickly. I have 2 ways of doing it. First of all, by increasing the salaries of members of the armed forces. We don't pay our soldiers enough, and we can do military purchasing in a better way. We need to fast-track this to make sure that we're able to protect the Arctic.
Mr. Baylis.
So if you go on my website, you'll see my program for Canada's defense, and it's clearly laid out that we have to protect the Northern Passage. It's a national priority to protect the Arctic. And as Madame Gould underscored, we have to pay our military better. Now, we are going to invest. We have to invest 2% of our GDP for defense, but we have to do it intelligently to protect the North. And that's how we're going to meet this challenge.
Freeland.
Stéphane, thank you for the question. It's so important. The reality is that today we can no longer rely on the United States to defend us, because now it's the U.S. president who is threatening our sovereignty. So we need a new approach to national security and defense, And it has to begin with the Arctic, the North. We have to work very closely with our northern allies, including Denmark, which is also being threatened. We have to work with our European allies who have nuclear defense capabilities, France and the UK, and we need to invest in our own defense. I agree with Karina. I do believe we need to invest the full 2% by 2027. But I wouldn't send those checks to the U.S. Industrial military complex. I want to invest in Canadian companies.
And it's 30 seconds only because we're almost through. 30 seconds.
I will respect the time. I'd like to add the following. 80% of each dollar goes to the U.S., a country which is threatening us. And this is the reason why I've said that we have to increase defense spending by the end of the decade. We can do it more quickly, of course, but we have to invest here in Canada.
So let's talk about energy here in Canada. New pipelines might be necessary. I know we're sending oil to the United States. There was also talk about an east-west pipeline that Quebec refused. So what do we do? If the idea of implement comes back, you said two things, Mr. Carney. You said we'll never impose a pipeline to Quebec, but you also said it could be possible to use the federal government's power, including emergency powers, to accelerate projects that our economy needs. So what does that mean? It can't go through all of Canada and not go through Quebec. Quebec says, no, how are you going to manage that?
Pretty simple, really. A project like Energy East is possible. It's a fact. It's possible to build an oil pipeline from Quebec to the Maritimes, from Alberta to displace our oil exports to the U.S. 70% of our oil comes from the U.S. today. Our neighbor, no longer our friend, of course. I think it's an opportunity for us that we should seize. Quebec, Ontario, Manitoba, Saskatchewan have to agree, they have to buy in.
But Quebec right now, because it's Trump that's threatening, but maybe Quebec will say now that Trump is threatening.
Well, that's a possibility. Yes. Everything's changed. It's quite possible that they now say yes. A final point, the federal government has to act quickly and rigorously to support a project like Energy East if it's in the interest of the whole country.
Ms. Freeland.
We need to do two things. We have to diversify our exports, and we've already done that with energy infrastructure. That's a good thing, and we have to continue. We also have to be more resilient with homegrown energy. In the riding I represent, people are heating their homes with natural gas that comes through a pipeline going to the U.S. That position is dangerous for us, and we have to do something about it. We have to change that.
Ms. Gould?
Thank you. Energetic security has become a very important issue for Canada. I'm not sure if it's a pipeline or if it's a discussion on refining our resources here in Canada, but it's a conversation that we need to have. We need to have this conversation while respecting provinces, territories, and Indigenous peoples. We need to protect our energetic security. We need to see how we can go forward with the resources that we have, and also we need to fight against climate change. I'd also like to say that I know for people here in Quebec, but also throughout the country, the cost of gas is something that concerns them greatly. So how can we work together to protect our energetic security, protect our economy, our sovereignty, and ensure a better
Mr. Baylis, what's your
future for
opinion?
Canada?
Well, it's time to have an honest discussion with Quebecers. We can the three ways of transporting oil. We can transport it by boat, pipeline, or train. Now, when it comes to shipping, just imagine if there was an accident on the Maritime Seaway, St. Lawrence Seaway. It would be an ecological catastrophe. And then concerning rail transport, remember what happened in Mégantic. So I've already announced that we're going to put into place 2 gas pipelines, one to bring natural gas from Alberta towards the eastern Canada, and the other one to take natural gas towards the west of Canada. It would diversify our markets, it would be good for Canada, and it would also be good for the environment, because it would give the European markets to replace oil and coal with natural
gas. May I add something quickly? I want to thank Karina for mentioning Indigenous people.
Well, First Nations have to be involved in this. What would be your approach with them? If Quebec says no, maybe the First Nations, and they're now partners and they have a thought, we have to consult them.
Thank you, Karina. And, of course, the participation of Indigenous people in our energy projects are extremely important. As Minister of Finance, I created a $5 billion program to make it possible for Indigenous communities to take part in the projects and to create greater prosperity for Indigenous communities. This is a start, but Canada must continue to include Indigenous people in our major natural resource projects. It boosts prosperity and reconciliation.
It's 9:47. I still have a few questions. If we have time, I can come back and we can talk about this again. The government, Trudeau, announces that it'll go forward with a project of $10 million for a high-speed train between Quebec and Toronto. These major investments might give positive both investment results and climate results. So what's your vision for this project? Is it to be financed essentially by the government? Is it a public project? Is it a private project? Is it a PPP? What should be done with this project that Mr. Trudeau is launching and Mr. Carney has the first word?
Mr. Trudeau announced the TGV this week. He didn't consult me. I don't have the figures. But it is an interesting project. It's very important for our economy in terms of how we fund this project. It's clear that there has to be public and private funding. It's clear that the federal government has committed to invest about $4 billion over the next decade to prepare for the project. Now, if the project is the right one, if it's viable, well, quite probably the government will support the project.
I fully support the project. It's good for the environment, it's good for the economy, and it's even good for housing. Because if we have a high-speed rail, that makes it possible for people not to all live in major cities. We need a responsible approach. And a responsible budget means we need to have the funds and use the funds we need to build our country, to boost economic prosperity.
Yes, I support the program. I think it's an excellent idea for 2 reasons. First of all, it's good for the environment, that's clear, but it's also good for the economy. Why? because it's going to encourage new links. It's been demonstrated by studies in Europe that with the high-speed train, university professors and business women can travel about much more freely. So it's very good for the economy.
I agree. I think that everyone is in agreement. I've been working on this project for about 10 years. I'm very pleased to see that it's going ahead for all the reasons that my colleagues have stated. But I'd like to highlight that I'd like for us to talk about reconciliation more. And that's why I raised this subject. This is a fundamental issue for the future of our country, and we cannot go forward without partnerships, without the inclusion, without listening to the voices, the ideas, and also the leadership of Indigenous peoples here in Canada. And I think that it is very important thing of the Trudeau government. We have done more, and I would not
we have some 3
abandon
minutes
the
before
Indigenous
your
peoples.
closing statements. So, questions. At what point would you drop the writ? I can answer quickly. It
Yes, I can
depends
answer. It
where
depends
Canada is
where
at that point in
Canada
time.
is at that
If
time.
we're in
If
a
we
tariff
are
war
in
with the
a
United
tariff,
States,
war
then we'll have
with
to
the
see
US, we'll have
what
to
the
see
best
what is the
option is
best
for
option
Canada.
for Canada.
Mr. Carney now.
Exactly.
We should never take a
make
decision until we have
before
to.
you have to make that decision. I agree with what Ms. Gould has said.
Sondages, mais M. Trump ne cesse de dire ça me tente plus de parler avec Trudeau parce qu'il n'y a plus de pouvoir.
So we don't want to talk to Trudeau because he doesn't have any power. We want to talk to someone else who's going to be an elected representative.
Yes.
Well, there has to be a government with a clear mandate and a strong mandate at that. It's better to have a liberal government. Much better. Mr. Jobin, if you allow, there are circumstances, probably not the most probable circumstances, that things might happen. Things might happen by the middle of March. We'll make a decision accordingly.
I've been elected 4 times. I have a seat in the House of Commons. So as Prime Minister, I would have choices to make, and I would make my choice not on the basis of what the polls say, but on the basis of what's best for the national interest. If on March 10th we're in an economic war with the US, I would talk to provincial and territorial premiers, I would talk to the unions, I would talk to business people, and we would together decide whether Canada should go to an election or keep a stable government. And given the fact that I have a seat in the House of Commons, I would be able to make that decision and decide what is best for
30
Canada.
seconds for Mr. Baylis, because then it'll be your closing statements.
Well, with the threat of President Trump, it's essential that we have a stable government in place. The problem, of course, is that M. Poilievre is putting his personal ambitions ahead of national interests. So if it was possible to reach an agreement with Mr. Poilievre and say, listen, we need to be strong and united right now so that we can defend ourselves against Trump, that would be wonderful. But if he doesn't want to play along and he puts his own interest ahead of Canada, he's going to force our hand.
Time's out. Time's up. Mr. Baylis, you have 90 seconds for your closing statement. Go ahead.
Thank you. So,
Canada
is a country of wide spaces and broad ideas. We're going to have a strong and resilient economy for the benefit of all Canadians. We will have a better health system, in fact, the best health system in the world if we follow my plan, and we'll reestablish the confidence in the federal government when it comes to the delivery of services. And yes, we are going to stand up to President Trump. But let me underscore something that hasn't been said up until now. and it's important for me to do so. The French language and French culture is part of my personal identity. So Quebecers, Acadians, Franco-Ontarians, Franco-Manitobans, and Métis, I want you to understand that I am an ally for you in Ottawa. I will not only fight to protect, but promote French language and culture across the country. We will have a Canada that is proud and prosperous. This is the future that I want to build with you. So let's be courageous, let's be audacious, let us aspire to a Canada that we can all be proud of. My name is Frank Baylis, and I am asking for your support. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Mr. Baylis. 90 seconds for you, Ms. Gould.
Thank you. This evening, you've listened to a debate of ideas on a vision for the country. The reality is that we're not going to be conservatives light to win the elections. We're going to stay true to liberal values. We're going to fight for Canada. And to do that, we need policies for today and for the future. Not the same old, outdated political ideas from the 80s and 90s. You've heard my vision for Canada, to face today's problems. And we will be confronted with different ones tomorrow. We need new leaders who will fight for Canadians, a leader who understands what people are experiencing and who works each and every day to improve their lives, a leader who is able to stand up to bullies, a leader who will not back down. Canada is the best country in the world to have a family, to build a business, and one's future. We are a nation of creators, of innovators, of dreamers. That is where opportunities, empathy, and progress works hand in hand. I am the candidate for the future, and this future starts now.
Well, thank you. Mr. Carney now.
Members of the Liberal Party, Canadians, across the country, you've told me that you're concerned. You're worried about the future. You have told me that you want positive change. You're looking for a leader who can unite us. You want a plan to defend Canada, and that creates opportunities for all. I'm up for that task. I'm not a politician, a career politician. That's true. I'm a pragmatist. I'm a person of action. And when I see an issue, a problem, I want to solve it. Throughout my career, I've managed many economic crises. I've built strong economies, and I've gone through tough negotiations, and I've succeeded. That allows me to have the necessary experience to lead Canada through this turning point in the history of our country. I love our country. Canada has given everything to me, my family, my education, my values. I'm ready to give my all for Canada. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Carney. Ms. Freeland.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Jobin. Thank you, dear colleagues, for an excellent conversation. Tonight, it's clear that we are strong. We, the Liberals, are strong and united. We agree on a lot of things. Canadians today are coming together to defend our country. Restaurants are removing American wines from the menu. Snowbirds aren't going to Florida this winter. Our country is strong, intelligent, and united. I'm very grateful to be here tonight with 3 other Liberals who love Canada and to address the 400,000 Liberals who love our country as well. Pierre Poilievre agrees with Trump. They both say that Canada is broken. We know it's not. Canada and Canadians are more united than ever. Let's use that passion to make our wonderful country even stronger and more prosperous Tonight, let's make a commitment to fight for Canada. All four of us, all Liberals, all Canadians. Together, we will win.
Yes, thank you, Ms. Freeland. Thank all of you for your presence this evening and having respected the rules. Everything went pretty well, and this is the end, therefore, of this debate for the leadership of the Liberal Party, the French. My colleague will be the animator tomorrow, and the election will be held on the 9th of March coming up. Thank you very much for having been with us. Do you think that Donald Trump followed the debate this evening? Not the French debate.
Not in French.
Maybe tomorrow.
He knows who I am.
Alors, merci à tous. Bonne chance à tous.
Thank you all. Good luck to each of you. There's a few weeks of campaign within the party left. Have a good evening. Thank you, everybody, for having been there. Goodbye.
Well, there you have it. I'm not going to call that a debate. I'm going to call that a Me Too, a conversation, and another thing, as he was saying, as she was saying. And now we know why Ruby Dalla was kept out, because she would have asked some critical questions. It's so clear to me now, Alexa Lavoie, that there's basically an agreement amongst these four. Mark Carney's going to win. The others will be rewarded by a position in cabinet. Remember, Chrystia Freeland's own child has Mark Carney as the godfather. So these are friends. I don't think there was one harsh word exchanged, one attempt to criticize. That's why they kicked the others out. They were completely uniform. It was basically a series of escalating sound bites on the themes they all agree with. I mean, there was a little bit of fudging on pipelines through Quebec and on exactly how they would do the carbon tax, but those are trivial details. We just saw four people harmonizing together, and that could not have happened if a dissenter, a critic, a skeptic, someone with a different point of view had been allowed in, which is why they kept out Ruby Dalla. Very strange, very strange. I actually enjoyed it more than I thought I would. Frank Baylis speaks better French than I thought he did. We saw full-on crazy, each one trying to outdo the other. I think the craziest part in my mind, Alexa, was when Chrystia Freeland said, I met a 4-year-old in, I think she said, Saskatoon or Winnipeg, who said, are you going to protect us against Donald Trump invading? Yeah, sister, I don't think that happened. And I think you're crazy, but they know that that's working for them. That if they can swap Donald Trump as their enemy as opposed to Pierre Poilievre, if they can say, we're really scared about the 51st state, then maybe they can distract from their own damage that they did. So actually, I enjoyed the debate more than I thought I would, because it was just crazy after crazy after crazy. And now I know what was going on. It wasn't a debate. It was a conversation amongst friends. That's my take. Now, you were listening in the native French because you're Francophone yourself, so you probably experienced it a little bit differently. I was listening through the translators. What were your thoughts on the debate?
Well, first of all, one thing that I actually noticed, and it's obvious that Mark Carney is playing that card, but he keep repeating "Maître chez nous, Maître chez nous." That means master
of our own house, master in our own house, right?
And that is the slogan of Jean Lesage, one of our former prime minister during the Révolution Tranquille. And he keep repeating that slogan, of course, because he's going to search a part of the population who actually really love Jean Lesage. And also I saw that everybody agree with everybody. But I don't know if you saw, but when I actually challenge Mark Carney about if he will cut oil from Alberta to go to the US, right. And he said, why I would do that. But during the debate, he say like, oh, I'm happy to hear that François Legault is ready to cut the flow
of electricity.
Yeah, but he say also like, but we have another one, oil from Alberta. So he actually lied on this one again.
I'm glad you caught that. I mean, I will admit I grayed out a few times there. I mean, it was a little too mesmerizing. Keep going, Alexa. I'd like to hear more of your thoughts.
Also, but Mark Carney support the buyback program of guns.
Oh yeah.
So that is another thing that I saw. Also, is one of them that say that it would not change the number of immigrants, so it would keep it as it is. It just say that we just need to build more home for them, but he didn't commit himself to lower the immigration numbers. As the other actually say that the previous government, I was kind of surprised by, because Karina Gould is actually in that government, but she was saying that they were too ambitious, and we should lower the number. But I was just like, why you didn't do it when you were actually in that government? Also, I'm just looking quickly at what I wrote. I wrote a lot of stuff.
One thing that I remember is when Karina Gould was talking about 2 million people a year, and I think it was her who said, we can't allow critical comments about immigration the same way they have in the States. And I want to hear that again, and I want to make sure, I mean, I was listening to the translator, but you know, and the weakness of the French, I think Mark Carney's French seemed the weakest. Karina Gould was also weak. I think Frank Baylis was the best, and Chrystia Freeland was workable. So there was one moment when Mark Carney said, we all agree with Hamas. And instead of when he meant to say, we all agree on Hamas that they're bad. But you know what? Show me a time when the liberal media's let a conservative with rusty French off the hook. But there was a moment there when I'm pretty sure Karina Gould said, we can't allow critical comments about immigration. Well, actually, and this is the party talking about how much they value the Charter of Rights. And you know, I burst in my one interjection. I just couldn't sit quietly. Well, Chrystia Freeland, the finance minister who seized hundreds of bank accounts with a smirk when she said she was going to stand up for civil rights. And they're so butch, aren't they? They're so tough. How they're going to go to war with Donald Trump. Although Frank Baylis said, well, I wouldn't actually go down there. Like the question, the moderator of the debate said, are you afraid to see Donald Trump? Like, and some of them basically said yes. I mean, Frank Baylis said he wouldn't go down there. I mean, the others were talking about, you know, how this was like a D-Day battle or something. They're so dramatic.
But actually, some people, like I was reading the chat in the same time, and they all agree that say, can you stop talking about Trump and actually talk about what is going on in Canada, and stop keeping Canadians in fear for just trying to get more momentum for maybe having like a strong mandate, as Mark Carney was saying. We need a strong mandate to go against the tariff and against Trump. I don't know what they would do, because when they were questioned about if they will launch an election, if they get elected, none of them wanted to answer that question. They were like, oh, it's depend. I'm not going to go to the poll.
Well, and I'll tell you what that means. That means they're going to hang on as long as possible. I'm worried they're going to hang on all the way until October. And when I mean they, I mean Mark Carney, because he's clearly going to win. Hey, Alexa, I'm going to read some of the super chats, the thumbs up, the Rumble rants. I'm not sure the source of these. Hathor chipped in $14. Thank you. Kim Allen, also $14. Thank you very much. Nancy, $14 and said, do you think Trump is trying to protect Canada from foreign interference? I don't think Trump is focused on Canada. I mean, look what Trump is doing right now. He's focused on solving the war in Ukraine, you know, the fires in LA, the DOJ cuts, getting his nominees approved by the Senate. He just got Kash Patel, the head of the FBI, the other day. So he's so busy on huge files. Today, Apple announced they're going to put, I think, $500 billion of investment. So I don't think Donald Trump thinks as much about Canada as we think about him. I could be wrong on that. Angus says, when will Liberals stop putting foreign aid above Canadian economic stability? We are trillions in debt. Taxpayers can't afford to financially do this. Oh, every one of the Liberals here is so big on foreign aid, and probably foreign aid to the UN. Side Easy says this is a dumpster fire of ideas. I have to agree. Jonathan Rogler says Freeland is clearly just propping up Carney. The second Carney screwed up and said, we agree with Hamas, she instantly jumped to his rescue. That is a good observation. And Elisa S., great to hear your voice again. It's great to see you, Ezra and Alexa. Not sure how long I can handle listening to these buffoons. Keep up the good work and sending love to all you at the Rebel. Well, thank you so much. It's nice to hear from you again. Wendley Doppelganger says, they hold us hostage to gaslight us for this. Wow. I don't know how many people in English Canada were watching. I bet you Quebecers were watching. And I wonder what they think about the French facility. Because, I mean, Quebec's francophones, they weren't disastrous. Like each of them could operate en français. But I think the Bloc Québécois leader will enjoy his superiority in French. I'm going to just whip through a couple more of these. Woody Doppelganger says, MLMR, Rebel, these people don't deserve to represent Canada. I don't know what your acronym stands for. Woody Doppelganger again, when do we find out who wins this hostage debate? Well, I mean, the winner is the beholder. They hold us hostage to gaslight us for this. Lots of comments. And then I just want to read one more ad from stickerpack.com. And then I'll come back to you, Alexa. Are you ready to show your support in style? Sticker Mule has a fantastic offer just for you. For a limited time, you can grab free Trump stickers. That'll be interesting to see who goes for those in Canada. But you heard that. They're free. Whether you want to decorate your laptop, car, or office space, I'll take some. These high-quality, durable stickers are perfect for making a statement. They would scare any liberals. I'll put them on my door to scare off liberals. Just imagine how great they'll look, and they're super easy to apply. Here's how it works. Head over to stickerpack.com. That's stickerpac.com. Sign up and claim your free stickers and watch the fun unfold. Don't miss out on this exclusive offer. Stock is limited, so act fast, spread the word, and let your voice be heard with Sticker Mule's awesome stickers. Once again, visit StickerPack. That's stickerpac.com today and grab your free Trump stickers before they're gone. And I imagine that would be a wonderful gift for the Liberal Party member in your life, if you have one. Alexa, I think I read all the super chats and whatnot. There's one more by Woody Doppelganger who says, Canada needs to be put first. Trump is not the issue our government is at the moment. We need a strong government with a strong mandate. All right, well, we took care of the commerce there for a second. Alexa, help me out when they were asked, would you put the pipeline through Quebec? Because I saw some dodging there on whether or not these candidates, the whole idea of the pipeline is right now, almost all of our oil that we sell goes to America. We could have had a pipeline to the West Coast. We could have had a pipeline to the East Coast that was stopped by the Liberals. So that when Trump says he's going to bring in tariffs, we have no way to get to other customers because our oil is landlocked. So one of the answers was the Energy East pipeline that, as the name suggests, would take oil from Alberta all the way to St. John, New Brunswick, which is actually the largest refinery in Canada. It's filled with OPEC oil, if you can believe it. So will these candidates support a pipeline through Quebec, even though that province says it's, quote, socially unacceptable? I remember when you asked the premier himself that question. You guys, if you can find that, let's grab that so we can play that question. Alexa was right on the file. Can you tell us while we're looking for that clip, can you tell us what the four candidates said in response to that question, Alexa?
But the only one who actually had a firm answer was Baylis. What he say is already have 2 gas pipeline already in his plan, and he is going to re-look into an oil pipeline that will pass through Canada. But the other one, Carney say that he needs to look with the provinces if they are agreeing or not to have a pipeline. But he's saying, like, because the interviewer was saying, but it might change, like maybe like now Quebecers are more into it now since we have like Trump tariff and everything. And so he said that he's actually not against reviewing the social acceptability in Quebec, but we need to remember that Mark Carney got caught saying that he's going to use the emergency power to build green energy project. And afterward, it was like, no, I will never impose a pipeline into Quebec. So what do you want exactly? Because what he's saying is actually, it's okay for green energy. I'm going to use the emergency power. We actually remember last time they used the emergency powers.
Yeah.
They beat up Canadian in Ottawa. So no, I don't trust any of them, especially Mark Carney. He did advocate for net zero. He actually advocates for the carbon tax. Now he's saying that I'm going to scrap the carbon tax, but put it on big polluter. But putting that on big polluter, they will give the bill to the consumer. That is all of us.
You know, he had a weird thing about we're going to be a superpower of clean energy. That's just such jargon and cliches. So what does that even mean? The question was, will you build a pipeline? We want to be a superpower of clean energy. Hey, in a second, we're going to go to our guest, Jonathan Hamill. Before we do, I want to play that clip of you scrumming François Legault, the Premier of Quebec, asking about this very issue. Let's take a look. Here it is.
Mr. Legault, how come you don't agree with Premier Smith's idea to build new oil and gas pipeline to diversify our export markets so we are not only trading with America, given Trump's tariff threat? So she said that it would make Canada stronger. Do you believe that too?
I just answered this question. It's the same thing. We talk about Energy S or GNL. I think that we need to have social acceptability. And if Danielle Smith or whoever table projects, will look at them, but we need to have social acceptability.
Well, good work for you scrumming the big shot there. Hey, Alexa, I want to go, give us 1 second, and then we're going to, on that, if you have any more thoughts, and then we're going to go to our guest who's patiently standing by.
It's just so crazy that our premier is saying that, because he got elected mainly by the active class that was for extracting our natural resources, that was for being prosperous on our natural resources. And François Legault wanted that. He also said that for being in politics for a while, he knew that they were dogmas that wanted them to not realize the extraction. But I'm pretty sure that now he just bend the knee to the dogma and the dogmatic who actually, I would call them like activists who don't want any project with like oil and gas and natural resources. It's clearly what happened.
Well, Alexa, we're going to go now to our guest who is patiently standing by. His name is Jonathan Hamill. He stands for life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, freedom of speech, and the free market. And welcome to the show. And I will leave you to Alexa's devices. First of all, welcome. What did you think of the debate?
Oh, yeah. Thanks a lot for the invitation. And thank you, Alexa. I had plans tonight, but I had to force myself to listen to Chrystia Freeland for a few hours. It was really nice of you to force me to do that. Well, the debate was not really surprising. A lot of the candidates agree with each other. I was surprised with some of the candidates. Karina Gould of French fluency was pretty surprising. Mark Carney's French is not as bad as I thought it would be, to be honest. But yes, some problem from time to time. But like I said, no surprise for me. They agree pretty much on everything. They stand along the lines, the partisan line of the former Trudeau administration. So for me, there was not really much surprise for tonight's debates.
Go ahead, Alexa.
I have a question for you. Do you believe that what they say about Quebec, it's actually representing Quebecers?
Oh, it's funny because their support is skyrocketing in the polls. If you look at the last poll, they're now, I think, at 40% in the polls. So people are switching from the Bloc to the Liberals. It's a weird electoral dynamics. No, I think it's completely disconnected. This party is traditionally very centralizing against respecting the traditional powers of provinces. There's multiple problems with their lines, especially on Bill 96, etc. So it's not very clear. It's always like a salad of words. They're not stating clearly what they're going to do. On pipelines, only Baylis is clear. It's my surprise of the night. Actually, I didn't really know the guy. It seems like the only adults in the room. But no, I'm not surprised about anything, and I don't believe anything they said about Quebec or anything else, to be honest.
Did you felt like I was just watching and I look at the question that they were asked, and a lot of the question was about like Palestine and Ukraine, while right now in Canada we have so much problem to focus on that I don't feel like I really learned about our issue. I had the impression that they were really more engaged when they were talking about other country than our own country.
And most of the problem we're having right now in Canada is a direct consequence of the policy of this administration for the last 10 years. And this is something they don't want to talk about. They want to make like the Trudeau administration didn't really exist. It's funny because most of Trudeau's minister directly endorsed Carney, so it will be like a smooth transition to the new regime. So yes, we're gonna talk. They talk about they talk about Gaza. They talk about Ukraine. Like we matter in this like geopolitical game in Eastern Asia. It's by far it's really far from the issues of I think average Canadians who are facing like skyrocketing inflation for the last years. They're really disconnected from what are the pressing issues, I think, of the day.
And one of the thing that Carney is saying is that it would take 3 years to balance the budget. And he say that he's going to cut the tax, but keep all the program as the 2 program. And I'm just questioning myself. He say we need to stimulate the growth, but are you stimulate the growth with immigration? Are you going to stimulate production growth when actually all the businesses, especially in Montreal, they are dying right now?
Well, like I said on X, is Mr. Carney's plan to balance the budget in the next 3 years is as realistic as my plan to win the Tour de France in the next 3 years. So it's not really realistic. Yeah. So again, it's a salad of words coming from a bureaucrats. And Mr. Carney said, "Oh, I'm not a politician." Mr. Carney was appointed by politicians all of his career. He basically is committed to all these craziness about net zero. So most of his professional life surround is politics. Even as central bank governor, governor is mostly politics as well. So the fact that he presents himself as some kind of wizards of the economy, it's a total gaslighting. He's by definition a politician, and he will repeat pretty much the same policies as Justin Trudeau and all of the failing progressive regime across the world that are now mostly getting mauled in front of their electorates around the world. So this is not a surprise to me. Yeah.
Hey, Jonathan, let me jump in for a second here. Let me ask the bigger question. I think Justin Trudeau was about to be crushed into powder, crushed like a bowl of eggs a month or so ago. And then he announced he was resigning in slow motion. And it felt like when Joe Biden had that terrible debate and all the Democrats sort of panicked, and then they said, we got to switch our candidate, and they put in Kamala Harris. I think that's exactly what's happened here. And obviously, the problems of Joe Biden were gone. I mean, Kamala Harris had new problems. Same thing here. Justin Trudeau, it took 10 years for Canadians to grow to hate him. And I don't think they feel that hate for Mark Carney. They don't know him. They may hate Chrystia Freeland a little bit, and they probably don't know Frank Baylis or Karina Gould. but I think almost anybody else other than Justin Trudeau would do better than him because he had 10 years worth of scars and fiascos and scandals, and people were just tired by him. Do you think in Quebec, what's it like in Quebec? Are people warming to Mark Carney, or is it just as long as it's not Justin Trudeau, we'd prefer anyone over Pierre Poilievre? Is that how it's going?
It looks like there's a momentum for Carney at the moment. There's probably some kind of Kamala's moment, like you introduced, the fact that there's a new player in town. Probably that the polls are a little bit distorted because of this fact. But to me, this is going to be the campaign is going to be really interesting. So we have to get over with this phony leadership race. I mean, it's pretty much a crowning at this place at this point. So just let's get over with. But the tariff crisis really resuscitate the Liberals and Justin Trudeau, which is now still PM, and I have to explain that to American partners. Say, why this guy is still on TV as premier? Didn't he resign like a month ago? Yeah. So I think most of the 51st state liners from Trump is directed towards Trudeau. He went away, then he came back, then the talking points came back again, and ironically, it resuscitated the support for the Liberals through Mark Carney. And to be honest, I'm not really satisfied from what I'm seeing with the Conservative at the moment. They're kind of searching for their footing at this point, sharing some of the talking points with the Liberals. We're seeing some of the support slipping through from the base through Maxime Bernier and the PPC. And I think we have a slim margin that we can tolerate because before we see 2021 happens all over again. If we see 4 or 5% slipping to the PPC, we're going to lose 30, 40 ridings and maybe lose the government.
Is that interesting? I'll let Alexa ask her last question to wrap it up. I want to say a special thank you, though, for joining us and for putting up with watching so much liberal bamboozling. Last word to you, Alexa.
No, but I was just, it's just like to add about your question, Ezra. You were asking like the momentum in Quebec, and I will ask that to Jonathan. Do you? I perceive the momentum based on media coverage that is so agreeable with Mark Carney, and also because most of the Quebecers don't know who is Mark Carney, because most of them, they don't really speak in English, so they don't have the information of his previous life. And now we are trying just to paint him as a outsider and the new wave and the savior of the country, isn't it? And also because our population is it's mainly elder, so we have more and more old people, and the old people watch the TV in continue.
Yeah, I think it's our curse. I mean, the media here in Quebec, there's a linguistic reality. We call it le dôme in alternative French media. We call it le dôme. So people are under a dome of media coverage, and the media coverage about Mark Carney was like overly enthusiastic. It basically ramped up its support for the last month. So this is why you see supports from the bloc going through the Liberals, which shouldn't happen in like a normal world. It's totally opposite. So yes, the media coverage has a lot to do with the rising support for Mark Carney. The Liberals were pretty much dead. They had no writings also in the Atlantic. Now they're reviving. So it is going to be interesting. I think it's going to come down to the campaign. So now they're going to have their leader. Mark Carney is going to be an unelected premier. It's funny because it's always these people that they tear down their shirts about democracy. They suspended parliament when they were about to get blown to pieces, like Ezra said. And now they're going to have an unelected bankers as premiers. How can people support that? That's kind of crazy.
And also, they talked about the recent announcement to enshrine the CBC into the law, like Radio-Canada. And one of their talking point, it was like mainly to save the French language to do this.
Yeah, exactly. Like French language depends on Radio-Canada. Come on, it's totally crazy. It's totally crazy. I mean, and it's worse in, you have to understand, it's worse in Quebec because of the linguistic reality. I mean, at least in the rest of Canada, you have some alternative media. You have Rebel that does a great job, but you have also like the US counterparts as well. In Quebec, we have a very small bands of rebels that actually carrying the flag, but it's a one-way fight, and it's very, very hard. I mean, I'm arguing all the time with people about that. And we have a lot of work in front of us to change that course.
Well, Jonathan, thanks so much for joining us. We'll say goodnight to you now. Appreciate you staying up. And your website is l'extremedroite.com, which I love it. I'll have to poke around and explore it. Thanks for your time tonight.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Right. Cheers. Well, Alexa, I want to show one quick thing. I don't think I've had a chance to toot my own horn on this yet, but yesterday, if you can believe it, the Wall Street Journal published an op-ed by me. And the Wall Street Journal is the second largest newspaper in America after the New York Times. And it's very prestigious, if I may say so. And here's the headline of my op-ed: Trump's tariffs help Trudeau and Canada's Liberals. Energy is what my country has to offer. Trump should forget tariffs and buy Canadian oil. And I basically make the America First case for the oil sands, because I'm afraid, I mean, you could see the Liberals certainly think that their fortunes are attacking Trump. I think at least 1/3 of tonight's debate was Liberals trying to outdo each other, how terrified they were about Donald Trump and his invasion and what do we do and how do we fight back. And they were sort of crazy. I think they half believe it, but they fill in the rest just knowing that this is their only chance. So even Americans know that the Liberals are sort of desperate. But
may I ask you though, if the Liberal example, they are staying into power and they decide to kind of like go against the oil and gas industry, what will happen with Alberta? Do you think that they will want to separate or just live?
I think that Alberta is, if Alberta is thrown to the wolves, if Alberta is punished and scapegoated and made to pay the price, you will see Western separatism. Now, the question is, will Pierre Poilievre become the prime minister first and undo that attack? That's the question. If Mark Carney quickly has an election, I believe Pierre Poilievre will still win. It won't be the massive majority he would have had against Trudeau, but I believe he'll still win. However, if Carney stretches it out till October or even later, I think Alberta's going to want to go. I saw a poll that shows 43% of young people are interested in joining the U.S., especially when Donald Trump says we'll give you free defense and we'll swap your Canadian dollars for American dollars at par. I mean, I think that Alberta would just, it would be too much. I mean, Danielle Smith doesn't want that. She wants a deal. So, but these Liberals will literally do anything to win. I want to say thanks to all the people who have been watching with us. I see there's 750 folks even now on Rumble, over 1,000 on YouTube, where we've been monetized again, to my shock, and I'm skeptical if I can even believe in that. I mean, we were basically banned for 8 years. I'm not sure how many are following us on X right now, but we had a lot of folks watching tonight. I'm really grateful to you. Alexa, I'm grateful to you for staying up late and listening en français. Special thanks to our folks here manning the control room, Efrain Oswaldo Flores Monsanto, one of my favorite people, and Olivia Bruni. Thanks to you two for staying up late and having the videos and other images and working things. And I know Dave Strigley and I think Doug were working on the text side of things, website side of things. So thanks to those fellas too. I want to tell you that tomorrow, the Liberals are having part 2 of the debates in English And I'm going to do it again. I'm not sure if you're going to be here, Alexa, or if it's Sheila Gunn Reid or whatever, but I'll be here tomorrow night for sure. And I'm sure we'll have other rebels along for fun. And who knows? Maybe we'll convince Ruby Dalla to come on for 15 minutes. I'd like to hear her point of view. But Alexa, a big thank you to you for holding the fort. And I love these live streams, even though I said I was going to be bored. I wasn't bored, actually. Because once I realized this is not a debate, this is an agreement. These people have a deal amongst themselves. They all know Carney's going to win, and they're all going to fall into line behind him. That was a very friendly get-together, and that's why they kept out Ruby Dalla. So now that I understand what we're watching, I can appreciate it for what it is, which is the Liberals literally doing whatever they can to win whatever they can. I mean, they will survive anything. That's why they're Liberals. Last word to you, my friend.
Just that it was interesting, and we didn't really learn anything. I would say Mark Carney is not really showing his true color. Is actually hiding, and he will hide until he get into the leadership, that he's become the leader of the Liberal Party, and afterwards we will know who is this man. But we have the portrait because we know him before he actually become the candidate for the leadership race of the Liberal Party. But I think tomorrow will be more interesting and more easy to understand for all the English speaker.
Yeah, and for the French speakers, because there was some bad French being spoken, better than my French, but it was a little rickety.
But I tried to understand with the dubbing, and I was not able, so I had to change and just to listen in French. But it's same in French. At one point, I'm pretty sure I hear that, but I'm not 100% sure. But I think I heard like Baylis one time, and I started laughing because I was like, oh my God, you say Baylis instead of Baylis.
You know what? There were some funny moments. I just want to say one more thing, and we got to pay the bills here for a second. I just want to say, I want to talk about the things that people are afraid to say out loud. And this is a little ad I have for 5G free. Who is in control of America's nukes? Obviously, it's not Biden now, but I don't know if it was even when he was president. Meanwhile, we have Russian ships off the coast of Florida and full-blown wars in Ukraine and Israel. The world is at its most unstable point since World War II. And with nuclear weapons, the stakes are 10 times higher. Trump said that even today. How do people like you and I stay safe? Every prepper needs to have RadioGuard ACE, the only FDA-approved drug to treat radioactive fallout. I didn't know that. Only the feds had it until now. That's why Rumble partnered with 5G Free, the only company in the world that has a supply of RadioGuard ACE and the ability to prescribe it prophylactically. I didn't know that. Get their radiation emergency kit with RadioGuard ACE, potassium iodide, Zofran, and a Geiger counter. There's simply no other tool in your arsenal to protect against a radioactive threat. Go to 5G Free, the numeral 5, the letter G, and then free.com. And the code is STUDIO to save 15% and get your radiation kit now. That is heavy duty stuff. But as Donald Trump said, we are close. Like if he doesn't solve this Ukraine war, it actually is a world war already. The North Koreans are in there. Anyhow, it's a very interesting ad from our friends at Rumble. So I wanted to read that. And thank you for understanding that we try and do some business here as well as some journalism. Alexa, bonsoir, my friend. À demain ou à bientôt. My French is terrible.
No,
excusez-moi.
It's good. I cannot judge you because my English is terrible.
Oh, your English is wonderful. We think it's great. We love you so much, and we're so glad you're flying the rebel colors in Quebec, that lovely province. Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining us, and until tomorrow. On behalf of all of us here at Rebel World Headquarters in Montreal and across the country, to you at home, good night, and keep fighting for freedom.